Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 963 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again on another Sunday fundraiser stream. And also, we've got big news from pretty much everywhere around the world tonight, including China and Taiwan, as well as North Korea and South Korea, and also in Ukraine, and also in the Middle East. Things are popping off literally everywhere, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as today has been an incredibly high day in the amount of news that has been coming out, and an incredibly high tension day as well. So we've been able to see that many areas are starting to become flashpoints of possible conflict around every single corner of the world, along with amazingly huge news coming out of the United States today, just out of southern Texas, which we'll be getting to here in a moment. But to give you all a little bit of a summary of everything that we've been seeing going on in just the past 24 hours, a massive Chinese armada has just appeared off of the southern coast of Taiwan, including the Liaoning class aircraft carrier, the first aircraft carrier of its type in the People's Liberation Army Navy, and the first type that has ever been seen so far in the low-level coercion attempts that have been made by the People's Republic of China against the Republic of China on the island of Taiwan. At the exact same time, we've also been able to hear additional statements showing that the Chinese are once again conducting another major war game spanning the entirety of the island's maritime borders, and once again leading many people to be quite afraid that this could lead to an all-out shooting war if a provocation continues to escalate beyond this point. We have also been able to hear some very concerning and major news coming out of the Korean Peninsula today, as we have heard that a South Korean drone has apparently flown over the city of Pyongyang, dropping propaganda leaflets over a large area of the city. In response to this, the North Korean government has now given 8,000 artillery pieces sitting along the South Korean border the orders to prepare for firing, and currently those artillery pieces are on standby and are awaiting the order to begin firing on South Korea at any given moment. The situation has never been this tense before, at least in the past few decades, and it does appear that we're having a resurgence of the escalations that were seen in between 2002 and 2005, where the North Koreans and the South Koreans actually got engaged in a small shooting battle with each other, firing artillery pieces across the border in response to each other. Meanwhile, outside of East Asia, we've been able to hear major news coming out of the Middle East, as we have seen today that the Israelis have once again been continuing their counterinsurgency operations against Iranian proxies within the Gaza Strip and also within southern Lebanon. We have also been able to hear some incredibly unfortunate news that a Hezbollah rocket attack was conducted today towards the port of Haifa and ended up striking an IDF base within the area, with a rocket impacting a diner on that base, wounding dozens and critically wounding several people who had to be helicopter evacuated out of the area, or helifact if you want to call it that, further south and towards Tel Aviv for serious medical treatment. We've also been able to hear that the United States has been preparing itself for the possible backlash that is to come from the Israeli strike that will be heading towards Iran at any given moment. Meanwhile, up in Ukraine, things have been going pretty wildly today, with the Russian offensive in Kursk once again, like we predicted, running into a complete brick wall on the second day of the offensive, making practically no ground whatsoever and still sustaining incredibly high losses compared to the Ukrainians' largely effective defensive within this area. We have also been able to get some pretty significant news from the Russian Federation that apparently things are still going pretty badly along most front lines, with some footage coming out today even suggesting that the Russians are doing a little bit worse, at least logistically and organizationally, than they have been in the past. We've also been able to finally see that the damage at Feodosia was severe, with most of the oil facility having been destroyed at this point. We have also been able to get some incredibly amazing and historic news out of the United States today, as the SpaceX Starship program, also Starship Flight 5, was successfully conducted today in an orbital test, showing another massive leap in United States rocketry technology, and once again showing that the United States is the largely the conqueror of space above. A pretty impressive feat today, and once again showing that the United States will be returning to the moon and also making a visit to Mars here within the next few years. And on the Starship program, that will certainly be a massive possibility. But we have absolutely loads of news to cover today, an insanely high amount of it from pretty much every single corner of the world. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on down into the area of Taiwan because we have absolutely major news coming out of this area today, and it does appear that things are escalating pretty rapidly at this moment. But before we do, I also have to bring up that tonight is the Sunday fundraiser night, and we have already raised nearly $1,000 for revived soldiers of Ukraine.
Hey, fantastic,
Hey!
man. Already 1,000 almost. It's crazy.
Man, it is absolutely crazy, and it is a really interesting night because tonight's fundraiser is for Revived Soldiers of Ukraine, a nonprofit that has been helping out since 2017 and helping to save the very wounded soldiers of Ukraine from near death, and also to help them on the path to revival. Every single dollar that y'all put in this fundraiser will be directly sent to Revived Soldiers of Ukraine, and will be helping out massively in saving the lives of loads and loads of Ukrainian soldiers that have been sacrificing pretty much everything up to their lives in the defense of Ukraine and the defense of the rest of the Western world within East Europe. But moving on from that and on into East Asia, speaking of an area within the East, we have been getting some incredibly interesting news from the area of Taiwan today, as we were able to get an announcement that a large Chinese fleet has been spotted, practically an armada, within the area of southern Taiwan's maritime borders. This came right after a statement from Beijing saying that they were ready for battle with the Republic of China, also called Taiwan by the general public, and according to Taiwan's defense ministry, they said a Chinese naval group led by the aircraft carrier Liaoning had entered the waters near the Bashi Channel, which connects the South China Sea to the Pacific Ocean and separates the Taiwanese island from the Philippines. That area is actually about right where this marker is. This is the Bashi Channel, which separates the nation of the Philippines from the island of Taiwan and also connects the South China Sea to the Philippine Sea and the greater Pacific Ocean. This is something that is fairly concerning, considering that this is the first time ever that we have heard mention of a Chinese aircraft carrier being involved in one of the escalatory measures conducted by the People's Liberation Army Navy within the area. The Liaoning class aircraft carrier is not the most concerning aircraft carrier that's ever been seen in the world, considering that it literally is a Kuznetsov class aircraft carrier, and funnily enough, it's actually the one that was sold to the Chinese by the Ukrainians way back in the early 90s. To explain why that happened, because a lot of people will be saying that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why in the world would the Ukrainians sell the Chinese an aircraft carrier? Things were very different at the time. You see, Ukraine had just declared independence from the Soviet Union and was practically broke. They really didn't have any money at all, and so the Ukrainian government was desperately trying to find ways to finance their country and keep the country above water, at least at a bare minimum for the time. And the one way that they could do this is take the almost unfinished, it was almost completely done, but still unfinished, Kuznetsov hull that they had inside of Ukraine, and to sell that to the Chinese, who were currently in the market for a brand new aircraft carrier. The Chinese ended up getting it and largely finishing out the remainder of the Liaoning class aircraft carrier that we see today, and since then, it has been in operation with the People's Liberation Army Navy as largely their only aircraft carrier, just recently joined by another Type 002 class aircraft carrier, almost of the same design, but with some major improvements, and now we are seeing that the Chinese are finally constructing and finishing their third aircraft carrier, the Type 003, which is completely different than a Kuznetsov class aircraft carrier and does have a higher capacity to carry more aircraft and more helicopters along with it, in greatly enhancing its strike capabilities wherever it's attempting to power project. But nevertheless,
at least they've got something that's working at this point, because their submarine, I believe it was a submarine that they were making, it just sunk in the port just a short while back. So it's like at least the Chinese Navy has something to call its own, because they lost a sub.
Yeah, man, I mean, the submarines are doing a little too good at their job because they're submerging and they're not really coming back up. But one thing is for sure, this is a pretty decent escalation, because while it is not the most dangerous aircraft carrier in the world, at least in terms of the firepower that's able to project in an area, it is still an aircraft carrier, and it's incredibly concerning for the fact that it's able to project firepower abilities away from China's shores, which ends up being a really big thing for Taiwan, considering that at any given moment, this aircraft carrier could start to operate aircraft off of its flight deck that could end up striking the areas of southern Taiwan, or at least trying to interdict Taiwanese air missions within that region of airspace. This is a fairly big deal, and I once again will also want to make sure that y'all know, just to get down here and show you all the complement of aircraft that this thing has, it is able to carry 24 J-15s, which are a kind of license-built version of the Su-27, if you want to call it that. They're also able to carry 6 Z-18s, which is the Chinese Chinese equivalent, if you want to call it equivalent to anything, of the Sea Stallion. It's also able to carry 6 Z-18Js, which are pretty much the same thing, and also 2 Z-9s, which are a sort of a light utility helicopter that looks a lot like a Eurocopter, and we actually believe it's largely a copy of a Eurocopter, but it is able to carry 2 of those as well. So it has a pretty decent complement of aircraft on board, but I do want you all to keep this in mind. For a Type 001 class aircraft carrier, or the Liaoning, to match the firepower of a single American aircraft carrier, like a Nimitz class aircraft carrier, you would have to have 3 Liaoning class aircraft carriers to match a single Nimitz class supercarrier and the amount of firepower that's able to project anywhere in the world. And not only that, this thing is not nuclear powered, it's actually diesel powered, meaning that it cannot stay at sea indefinitely, of course not reliant on actual supplies like foodstuffs and things like that. It will have to return to port, and its range is quite limited for that reason. But nevertheless, it is very concerning, at least in the regional area around Taiwan, and has led a lot of people to believe that this may be a bit of a big deal. And at least according to the information we're getting at the moment, these things may be once again transpiring into being a little bit of a bigger deal. Low-level coercion by the People's Republic of China is one of the main ways, out of the 3 ways that they attempt to reunify China with Taiwan, that they've been currently conducting for the past few years. And we can actually see the areas that will be included in the Chinese joint sword exercises in this part of the year. And we can see that the entire area of the island is surrounded by military exercise areas by the Chinese. Every single side, the southern side, the eastern side, the western side, and the northern side, are all surrounded by the Chinese Navy at this moment, that is once again conducting war games and military exercises. I do want to belay some fears, though, or at least settle some fears. The Chinese will most likely not be going to war with the Republic of China here, at least within the next few years. We do expect that the Chinese Navy is still trying to build out their amphibious landing capabilities, which are currently greatly handicapped, if you want to call it that. They don't really have enough amphibious landing vessels to be able to support a sizable enough landing force to actually threaten the island of Taiwan, but they are rapidly working on fixing that problem, and by the later end of this decade, around 2029 to 2030, we are expecting that they will have enough amphibious landing vessels and also a large enough navy at that point to actually support a large enough amphibious operation on Taiwan that it actually would pose a serious threat to the island nation. It is once again showing us that the Chinese are really starting to ramp up the heat and the pressure, not only on Taiwan itself, but also on the United States, considering that we assure the sovereignty of the government of Taiwan on the island, to figure out where we are and what we're going to be doing. The largest threat the Chinese actually have wargamed out is not the island of Taiwan itself, its military, or its government. It's actually the United States' support of the island. That's the thing that the Chinese have been most concerned about for an incredibly long time. And from what we understand, that's really what stopped them from attempting reunification attempts, really armed reunification attempts of the island up until this point. And so we are seeing that this is once again something that the Chinese are trying to test out and see if it's going to end up going their way, or if the United States is going to step in and once again make this an incredibly difficult problem for them, one that they may not ever be able to achieve. But a load of people have been weighing in on this in the moment, and it seems as though a lot of people are kind of talking about, is war inevitable with China over Taiwan, or is it not? And a lot of people really have been weighing into this. And Matthew, what are people saying, and what are you thinking about it as well? Do you think that war is coming, or do you think it's still a little bit of ways away and this is more diplomatic posturing with guns by the Chinese?
All right, so now that we have seen, like we're showing right here, once again, the Chinese have encircled the island of Taiwan in its entirety, which of course, that's very intimidating to the Taiwanese, I'm very sure. But the question is war inevitable, or is it simply posturing once again by the Chinese? And right now, about 44% of the audience said it's simply just posturing by China, while 40% said war is inevitable in Taiwan, and 9% said I need more intel on the topic before I can actually say something about it. And on this one, I would have to say, since this is not the first time that Taiwan has been encircled, the odds of war actually happening from this encirclement are probably not very high. It looks like it's probably simply more posturing by China. And once again, this was not some sudden exercise. This was announced ahead of time, so we did know it was going to happen. But of course, nonetheless, there's always concerns that war could break out when a large exercise like this starts happening, because remember, remember, in Ukraine, that entire war started out with a military exercise by Russia, and then it turned into an all-out war invading Ukraine. So that's the fears currently right now in Taiwan, but I think overall there's probably not too much to worry about because, of course, there are a lot of implications to invading Taiwan that I'm not really sure if China is really ready to handle at the moment. So I'm with the 44%. It looks like posturing and probably not war as of right now. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, this certainly is probably a great deal of posturing by the People's Republic of China at the moment. We wouldn't expect that they would be ready to conduct a war with Taiwan well into the later end of this decade, of course, due to their naval shortcomings. And of course, size doesn't always matter, but for the Chinese, it really does. They have to have enough amphibious landing vessels to actually land on the island, and that's something they really don't have. There's like an actual physical limitation that is stopping them from invading the island at this moment. That wouldn't stop them, though, from conducting a shooting battle, but if they're not entirely ready for the war, meaning that they're not ready to land actual forces onto the island once this conflict begins, they're only giving the United States time to respond and to stop this conflict before they're actually able to force a ground invasion of Taiwan and try and quote-unquote reunify Taiwan that way. So we are largely expecting, dang, LSA Rocks just threw in a $500 donation to the fundraiser, bringing it up to an amazing $2,000. Oh my lord, that is absolutely
That's the
crazy.
biggest one of the night, actually, so far.
That is absolutely insane right there. And huge shout out to LSA Rocks. I hope everyone gives a huge thanks to LSA Rocks because that $500 donation is going to be helping to save a lot of wounded Ukrainian soldiers from a great deal of trouble and maybe even death thanks to that support to revive soldiers of Ukraine. That is absolutely insane. But moving on from that and back into the analysis before I get too hyped up on that, because that was absolutely freaking crazy, we are expecting that they probably will not be able to invade the island any soon. This is certainly a great deal of diplomatic posturing, but it is still something that we have to consider quite seriously because there's a lot of implications behind the military posturing that's being conducted. So let me explain how the Chinese work with Taiwan, because this is how it all comes into a big picture, and this is why this was something that I brought up as a serious note tonight instead of just kind of bringing it up as a side note. The Chinese are adamantly into the idea of reunifying all of what they believe to be Chinese lands to China. This actually includes several areas. It includes an area called Arunachal Pradesh inside of India. This area is technically considered to be Indian, but the Chinese say that it is theirs, and therefore for that reason there have been some decent border skirmishes with the Indians about control of Arunachal Pradesh in this area. We've also seen the same thing over the Himalayan mountain region, or more so the Kashmir province up in this area. The Kashmir province is probably one of the most contested regions in the world. A lot of people always say that the Middle East is a very contested region, but in reality, it's actually Kashmir, because Kashmir is claimed by 3 different nuclear powers: the Pakistanis, the Indians, and the Chinese. All 3 of them are nuclear armed, and all 3 of them claim that they control pretty much the large majority or the entirety of the Kashmir province or the Kashmir region within this area, and have actually ended up going to armed exchanges over this region. The Chinese are once again trying to reunify this large area right here, which they consider to be a part of Tibet, and we have seen that over time they've ended up getting in a decent amount of border clashes with the Indians, trying to reclaim this land and claim it as their own, or largely exert control over it as their own. The Chinese have also done the same thing to some other countries, actually, including the Soviet Union and now the modern-day Russian Federation, as the People's Republic of China actually claims certain islands within the Amur River to be theirs and not the Russians. And several times in the past, during the Soviet Union, they actually ended up getting into literal firefights, and several hundred Soviet and Chinese border guards would end up dying in these firefights over the control of these islands. And, you know, of course, it seems very insignificant, but y'all can see through time and time again, the Chinese are always attempting to reunify all of the land that they believe is theirs. And Taiwan is actually the crown jewel of all of these lands. It's not only just a piece of land, it's a economically successful piece of land. And the Chinese are always desperate to add some sort of economic prowess to the People's Republic of China because it helps them to be able to grow their abilities in the long term. The Taiwanese are the only country in the world that largely produces semiconductors and wafer chips for computer systems. Very few other countries are able to produce those, and if they do, they produce them in limited numbers. Nearly 80% of all semiconductors and wafers for semiconductors are produced in Taiwan by TSMC. Currently, that is in the process of being transferred mostly from
If
Taiwan.
you really
Go ahead.
if you really think about it, like that's crazy that 80% of the like the computer chips like that, the silicon chips, the 3 nanometer and things like that are created literally right there in Taiwan. That seemed like such a really bad idea to like set up the manufacturing just on the island, knowing that China's had ambitions to reintegrate it into its mainland. That's kind of just weird, like the way that went. We're really behind the 8 ball when it comes to trying to transfer that industry out of Taiwan because, like you said, we're trying to transfer it here to the United States, but it's still years out from being completed, like transferring that whole manufacturing operation here, and it's just really tough. And even China knows they're having a hard time manufacturing those chips, and that's why they want Taiwan as well, and that's why TSMC has threatened to destroy their facilities if the island was invaded by China. So I just never understood that, why we put all the manufacturing on the island, and no one ever thought to maybe give TSMC like a larger investment to take their operations elsewhere before we finally realized that China might invade the island.
Well, interesting enough, to give you a quick little bit of history behind TSMC, TSMC wasn't put on the island by the United States. It actually was founded by a Taiwanese company, by Taiwanese people on Taiwan, and they actually reached out to investors like Texas Instruments and others to look for investments, and they all turned them down. The only company that invested into TSMC was Philips, and that's the only reason why TSMC ever even existed, is because of the capital funding given to them by Philips. But beyond that, TSMC is 100% a Taiwanese company founded in Taiwan, and probably one of the major economic miracles and successes of the entire island, which is really the craziest thing about TSMC. The fact that it's there is kind of just a unfortunate coincidence, really, but nevertheless, it makes Taiwan that much more important to defend. A lot of people already know this because y'all are watching this on a computer right now, but computer technology is one of the most important things that has been created in the modern world. It has ushered in something very similar to an industrial revolution. In fact, it would be considered even far more important and far more expanded than the industrial revolution, with the kind of impact it's had on industry, on the economy, on everything. Because of computer technologies, when you go to Wall Street, to the actual building on Wall Street where the New York Stock Exchange is, back in the day, literally just about 15 years ago, that building would have been teeming with people on that stock trading floor trading stocks all day. To get a seat on that floor, it cost millions of dollars. And thanks to the revolutionary introduction of the internet, especially in that kind of sector, we have seen that the New York Stock Exchange building now is literally empty, and the cost to get a seat on that trading floor is only, I think, $4,000 now. So as long as you have a company and $4,000, you can actually get a trader onto that floor for your company and have them trading stocks all day long, or purchasing stocks and other kinds of things on the stock room floor. That is something that's absolutely crazy to think about on that one perspective, and internet technologies have massively revolutionized every single aspect of life over just the past few decades that it's existed in the mainstream. And Taiwan is probably one of the most important countries in the world, at least in the Western world, for this kind of massive technological development. For this reason, that's why Taiwan is strategically important for the United States of America and the rest of the Western world to maintain their sovereignty. Not only for the fact that it's a Western aligned country, but for the fact of the major, I guess you could say, benefits that the entire Western world receives from Taiwan's existence. It's not to say that this company would cease to exist if the Chinese controlled it, but instead of the West having control over the major computer technologies that makes our world function, it would actually be a rival country, Communist China, that would be controlling this critical sector of technology and industry, and largely getting to control the ebb and flow of global economics because of that. It is a major deal, and that's why we see
I wonder if China would be so interested in taking Taiwan. For example, if TSMC was not there and Taiwan didn't have such a teeming economy, I really personally doubt that they would really want to take it that badly, because of course it would just be a piece of land at that point. And while it would be a propaganda victory to retake it, to say, okay, China controls that island once again, I just don't think they would want to take it as much if the economy wasn't doing so well in Taiwan. To me, that seems pretty obvious. But Enforcer, do you agree with that?
I would say I would probably so. You're lagging a little bit, so it's making it hard to understand you incredibly well. So could you say that one more time?
I was saying basically that I don't think China would want to take Taiwan as badly as they're trying to take it right now. If their economy and also the industries like TSMC were not on the island, also causing the economy to do so well, they probably wouldn't want to take it as badly as if, for example, the industries weren't there.
Oh, yeah, I would certainly agree with that. I would say 100% that's really the case because much like they wanted to reunify with Hong Kong, they wanted to reunify with Hong Kong not because the 99-year lease had ended, but because Hong Kong had become wildly successful. I have to put this out there for all of y'all just to remind y'all of this. Let me go to the Hong Kong GDP and show y'all this. This is absolutely insane. The little tiny, largely peninsula of Hong Kong, right down here, this tiny little area, it's literally a city-state, is producing a GDP annually of $359 billion. It is as big as the country of Vietnam in GDP, that tiny little city-state, and that's why the Chinese wanted Hong Kong, because it's such a major economic boom for the Chinese, and they want something like that in their country. That's why they want Taiwan. That's why they really want any territory that they can possibly exert a claim over that's wildly successful, is because it's adding a lot to their economic base, and it's helping them to continue to grow their country and achieve their plans of national rejuvenation by the year of 2049, which is something that's clearly been spoken about in the Chinese People's Congresses, especially in the fifth plenum during the year of 2021. But still, nevertheless, this is something that is being paid attention to, and this is also another reason why we have to make sure that the Chinese do not get a hold on Taiwan, and they are adamant at doing that eventually. They're waiting to see, whenever the time comes around, that the U.S. considers Taiwan to be expendable and we throw them away. And that's really what they're waiting for, and we have to keep on showing them with a strong amount of deterrence that the United States will stand in the defense of Taiwan and will ensure that the island of Taiwan and the government of the island will remain free from the People's Republic of China. But we also kind of play a little bit of a tightrope here. I want to put this out there. We do not officially recognize Taiwan as a legitimate country here in the United States on a governmental level, but we do recognize the sovereignty of the Republic of China's government on the island of Taiwan. So that means that while we don't officially recognize Taiwan, we unofficially recognize Taiwan. That's really what that means. And then at the same time, we also say that we openly encourage a dialogue in between Taiwan and China about future reunification attempts. That's our official stance diplomatically here in the United States, and we need to continue to keep that stance, because as long as we keep that stance, the Chinese can't justify a war with the island of Taiwan, but at the same time, they can't force them to join China either. So they're pretty much caught in an endless paradox diplomatically there, and if we can keep them in that kind of a condition, that'll be a pretty good state to have. But moving on from that, and out of Taiwan, we actually have to move y'all a little bit further north and to the Korean Peninsula, because if y'all thought things were sounding tense down in Taiwan, things that are happening up in the Korean Peninsula today were even more tense. We were able to hear of something that was absolutely shocking, and honestly, I would say is a great embarrassment for the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which many people would call North Korea, because the other name is a mouthful. But beyond that, in the city of Pyongyang, the largest city within North Korea, the only city that has some electricity for the large part, and the only city that is home to the only fat person in North Korea, we were able to see that something pretty interesting happened today. A South Korean drone violated the airspace of North Korea all the way from the DMZ all the way to Pyongyang, flew over the capital. The North Koreans actually have infrared footage, as you can see right here from North Korean state television, of the drone flying over Pyongyang, and the drone started to drop propaganda leaflets into the streets over the city of Pyongyang, the capital city of North Korea. This was considered to be a massive provocation, largely because a South Korean airborne object penetrated the airspace of North Korea, flew all the way to the capital, where we believe Kim Jong-un currently is at the moment, and then dropped propaganda leaflets over the city, clearly denoting its presence. To give you an idea of how far this thing flew into North Korea, it flew an entire 86 miles into the country, round trip. It actually somehow flew back out, from what we understand. It was not shot down. So going off of that news, we have seen that the North Koreans have been pissed, royally pissed. They have been outraged by this, and we've already heard that the North Koreans are making incredibly large escalatory actions near the area of the DMZ. Y'all did hear a little while ago that the North Koreans shut down all road and rail access across the border to South Korea, and also started to set up defensive positions within beneficial geographical areas along the border where they were able to have a defender's advantage. We are now starting to hear that all artillery units within the area have been given the order to prepare for full fire readiness, meaning that at any given moment they can be given the order to fire, and they will immediately start to open the guns, fire the pieces, and start to land shells onto the other side of the DMZ in South Korea. We've also been able to hear a possible scale of the firepower that's in this area. Now, I do want to make sure to say this quite clearly. We don't know if this is an exact proper statement, but this is the supposed number that's been put out so far. North Korea currently has 8 artillery brigades comprising 10,000 artillery pieces along the border. Now, I do have to say this. 8 artillery brigades with 10,000 artillery pieces sounds a little unrealistic. A single artillery brigade is not going to have 1,000 artillery pieces in it. Or more than 1,000 for that matter. That seems to be a little bit out there. But that's according to a state-run news agency in North Korea. So that may be a heavy deal of hype talk. It's probably a few thousand, but it's probably not close to 10,000 and 8 brigades, because those brigades would be so damn heavy administratively. Well, at least with the amount of administration that would have to be done for a brigade-sized command, these brigades would largely be combat ineffective if they were actually put into practice. But nevertheless, this is a picture of a North Korean artillery exercise, so you can get the idea that they do have a lot of artillery pieces, especially a large amount of the North Korean-made version of the Peon artillery system, which you can see down here. But nevertheless, it does seem as though right now the North Korean peninsula is literally one order away from the entirety of the DMZ lighting up like it's some kind of a Russian oil depot. And this is certainly a very tense situation for sure. And it seems as though escalatory actions by both sides on the peninsula are continuing, and they're really not dying down anytime soon, and we don't really think they will at this point. We're not really seeing anyone flinching and moving towards diplomacy. It seems like everyone's sort of moving down a path of possible exchanges or a border skirmish or maybe even a full-on war here in the near future. But a lot of people have been weighing in on this exact topic about the North Koreans, and North Korea has ordered its artillery, to say it again, to full fire readiness as tensions are soaring within the country, and a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts. And what are y'all thinking about this? Do y'all think that war is coming very soon to North Korea, well, really to the Koreas as a whole? Do y'all think war isn't happening and this is just more of the crazy, wild, wacky world of the Korean Peninsula? Do y'all think that South Korea is kind of provoking this, or are y'all a little bit unsure and undecided on this? And Matthew, what are you thinking about this as well?
All right. So on this question right here of what's going to happen after North Korea orders its artillery to full fire readiness as tensions are soaring in Korea, we're left to guess basically what is causing this. Is it because North Korea got embarrassed by the drone coming in and dropping some leaflets, or has it become because Kim Jong-un maybe ran out of his Twinkie stash in his office? We're not really sure, but 40% said war is not happening, it's totally fine, while 36% said war is coming very soon in Korea, and 9% said South Korea is provoking this, so I'm a little bit on the fence. And I would have to say that even though this is very, very tense right now, and of course, something could happen because everybody's at full fire readiness right now, including North Korea, it's very tense, but I don't think that war is inevitable right now. It's probably not going to happen unless there are further provocations by either side. Now, at this point, I would honestly say this. While South Korea is in the right and North Korea is a rogue state, South Korea would be very wise not to further provoke the situation because, once again, this is a hair away from going sideways. And while North Korea is a very not well-equipped force, we really don't want a war starting on the Korean Peninsula right at this moment. So hopefully both sides will calm down in this and tamp the tensions down so that way war won't break out over here, because we really don't need too many wars going on around the world at one time, because we're currently occupied in Ukraine and also the Middle East as well, and potentially with China and Taiwan. So we need to keep things sort of isolated in certain areas, like for example in Ukraine, and not let them get too out of hand around the world. So I'm with the 40%. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say quickly before I answer this, I'm seeing a large influx of people putting in political comments tonight. I guess this is being caused by the ravages of a presidential election here in the United States being just mere weeks away. Let me make sure to put this out there really quickly for anyone who may be new to the channel. This channel does not get involved in domestic American politics or the domestic politics of any foreign country out there. Neither do we allow discussions of that in the live chat. We are not going to have our channel devolve from a news channel to nothing more than a pretty much a commentary channel on modern American politics. There are so many channels like that out there that just pour out raw garbage from both sides. I'm not going to be that kind of a channel. So just want to put that out out there, if you are in the chat right now and you are discussing politics, I've actually gone through and gotten a couple of people and have given them 24-hour timeouts, meaning that they will not be talking for the remainder of the stream because we do not allow that kind of stuff here. That's a rule on this channel that's been around ever since the start of the channel, and I'm not going to be changing that anytime soon. If you have your political opinions, that's wonderful, because in the United States of America, we believe in people having political opinions. Nevertheless, this is not the place for them. If you want to talk about your political opinions, please make sure to do so on a channel like the Young Turks or Ben Shapiro or whoever the hell you would watch, because those are the channels that really kind of pander to that sort of thing. Not this one. We pander on the news. So if you want to hear news and you want to hear what's going on around the world, please make sure to stick around. If you want to talk about politics, there are literally millions of channels out there that do that very thing, and I'm sure that you could find an inexhaustible list of them that will agree with exactly whatever y'all are thinking. But moving on from that,
Oh, and also real quick, Enforcer, while we're giving the PSAs real quick, I see a lot of people commenting that I'm not coming through tonight. I do apologize for that. We're going to get the Wi-Fi situation, also the internet situation figured out here in the next 5 days or so. So bear with us. It'll only be like this for a short while longer on our streams. Right now, it sounds like mainly it's just me because I'm having to go through Discord on the Wi-Fi, which is causing some problems. But we will have that fixed pretty soon. It's not anything like on our end. Actually, the internet not being able to handle the streaming quality. So thank you for bearing with us on that.
And thank you, everyone, for bearing with us, because I can hear it as well. And Matthew is sounding a bit like a robot tonight, Matthew, because you'll go, yeah, and that's about very good news. It's like, what the hell is that? Like, it's like the weirdest noises, man. But it's fine. Don't worry about it. I don't want you to, not talk a lot because you're scared of, the glitches. It's fine. You're pretty much largely understandable, except for, the little hiccup here and there audio-wise. But, yeah, it's coming through a little bit. But beyond that, we are trying to fix that. I want everyone to know that, something that we do know and we are consciously trying to work on. A lot like we worked on the audio quality that I have by constructing an entire sound box around me to make sure that the audio is good and we're not disrupting anyone else around here. We are also going to be working on trying to get the Wi-Fi fixed up so that way we actually don't have Wi-Fi. We have Ethernet or actual cable internet, and then we'll be able to run things incredibly well from that point forward. But don't worry, everyone. We are trying to get that fixed. We already have something in line, but it's going to take a little bit of time to get that done because the wires actually have to be connected. They're not here yet. So with that, I hope that does address that well. But beyond that, I will have to say war may or may not happen on the Korean Peninsula. I want y'all to know that while we generally are not the kind of people who do fear-mongering on this channel and tell y'all that everyone's going to die tomorrow and the nuclear bombers are flying, because there's a lot of YouTube channels out there that do that, at the same time, the Korean Peninsula is a very dangerous place. A lot of people just kind of don't really want to believe that because it pretty much has turned into background noise with how dangerous the situation is here at all times. But the North Koreans are a very unstable regime. Their country is wildly poor. They really have no economic activity whatsoever, which is always a recipe for a highly unstable government. They also have a despotic regime in charge of the country, which is an incredibly questionable one that's conducted heinous atrocities, meaning that there are probably a lot of enemies that the central government has that would like to overthrow the government. Once again, making sure that's highly unstable and that it has to keep a tight control on internal and external affairs. At the same time, we also understand that the leader of the country is also a fairly unstable person. So all of these things combined, North Korea is a wildly unstable country that is bordering to a very stable and a very prosperous country to its south that is existing on land that North Korea considers to be its. So going off of that, this area is always just a little ways away from exploding. And over the past few decades, we have seen that it's almost boiled over into pretty much a second North Korean war. And something that y'all may not know, and let me go pull up this really quickly so that way I can show y'all this. Let me see here. List of border incidents, and let me go to the border instance here so that way I can find this for y'all and show it. So let's see here. Just to quickly go through some of them. Let's see. One North Korean agents hijacked a Korean Airlines flight and flew it to Pyongyang in 1958. In 1958, just a little while afterwards, an American F-86 Sabre was actually shot down at the DMZ, and the pilot was captured and released after 11 days of captivity in North Korea. But to get you all some more modern examples, at least from our millennium, let me go up here into the 2000s and tell you all about what happened in the 2000s. So, First off, 2 U.S. aircraft observing an ROK military exercise crossed the DMZ. We apologize for the incident and actually paid reparations to North Korea. That's actually very interesting. I had never heard about that one before. But let me see if I can move down. Here we go. The Second Battle of Yeopyeong led to the deaths of 6 South Korean sailors and the sinking of a South Korean vessel. The numbers of North Koreans killed is unknown. This was actually an exchange of fire that was conducted in between the South Korean Navy and the North Korean Navy just outside of Seoul, within this little area here, near this island, the Yeopyeong-myeon Island. This was a very interesting occurrence, and it's actually been the source of movies that have been made about this very instance inside of South Korea, and it's something that really can't be stated. They are at any given moment, the North and South Koreans can start to fire on each other, and people have died just within these past few decades in these exchanges of fire. Let me see if I can get y'all another one here. Let's see. 4 North Korean fighter jets intercepted the U.S. officials. Let's see. I'm trying to find the one. Let's see. Hang on here. They return. So 2 North Korean soldiers entered the DMZ, crossing to South Korea. They got fired on. Several gunshots are exchanged near a South Korean post in Yonggu, Gangwon. Let's see here. I'm trying to see if I can find the actual artillery barrage. Let's see here. Was allegedly sunk. Rescue operation. So here we go. A Republic of Korea Navy vessel, the ROKS Cheonan, which I'll show you all right here. This is the vessel, and you can actually see the pictures after it had been destroyed, was actually hit by a North Korean torpedo fired from a North Korean submarine. 46 sailors were killed in the incident, and this happened only in 2010, 14 years ago. So there is a lot of instances that we can pull out of the history books here showing that people can end up dying. This border is at an incredibly dangerous fever pitch all the time. And a lot of people don't realize that because it just kind of ends up being background noise. It's always like this all the time. So it's not going to be that bad. Nothing's ever going to get close to war. Well, it's not going to turn into a war, but they are literally just a moments away from war at all times. History has shown this since the end of the Korean War. So going off of that, we do know that this is a very dangerous situation, and I can't really guarantee whether this will or will not turn into a full-blown war, because it's so close to being one all the time, you just never really know. So hopefully it
It would
doesn't.
seem like a really bad time to start a war, though, considering that North Korea just sent their troops to Ukraine to fight for Russia. It's like, why would they do that? Send troops away from their country and then try to start a war with South Korea? It seems like a really bad time to try to pull something like that off.
It really would be. Like, I don't even understand why. It's still, the North Koreans have a lot of soldiers, and they probably sent a small amount of those soldiers in that one brigade to help out with firing North Korean rockets, or actually firing them to get some live fire exercises, pretty much, to send back to North Korea so that way they can learn and develop from it. But still, at the same time, it's a really interesting kind of an occurrence. But really quickly to tell you all how the war would go, because we have a pretty good understanding. The Chinese do have a defensive pact with the North Koreans, so we know that it wouldn't be Korean War 2.0, where MacArthur comes back from the grave and we go all the way up to the Yalu. Like, we're not going to be doing that. What would happen is, if a war did begin, the North Koreans would most likely attempt an invasion of South Korea. They would most likely overwhelm South Korean forces and push them back temporarily. It would be a bloody, absolute bloody battle occurring on the outskirts of Seoul and also through the countrysides heading out to Sochko, most likely. And then we would see that eventually, through overwhelming firepower brought forward by the United States and South Korea, the North Koreans would eventually be pushed back across the DMZ, and then we would most likely see that some sort of a peace arrangement would be made at that point. Because if we started to push into North Korea, the fear would probably be that they would start to use nuclear weapons. And also, we pushed into North Korea, the Chinese may actually get involved, and then we see a largely world war happening in the Pacific at that point, which of course everyone, the Chinese and the United States, would want to avoid. So it most likely would end up being a defensive war that would be won, but it would be an incredibly bloody and costly war to fight at all for anyone, especially the South Koreans and the North Koreans. But anyways, with that, I hope that does kind of cover that area the best we can. And moving on out of East Asia, because we've been in East Asia now for almost an entire hour, I do have to say really quickly that the fundraiser is doing wildly well. And with just 4 minutes before the top of the hour, we've reached $2,300 on the fundraiser. And I'm going to do something that we have not done in a little while. we're going to call up an ancient rite of the channel, Matthew. It is an order of a sort that has been put down in legend.
Order.
Order. General order is now in effect. If you are a part of the LSA and you have $5 to throw into the Sunday night fundraiser, throw it in right now. I'm going to be throwing in 20, so y'all should be seeing that right when I'm saying this on air, because there's about a 30-second delay in between me talking and y'all hearing it. But there should be a $20 super chat showing up right there in the chat, right there, leading the charge on this general order. But if you are a member of the LSA, and I'm going to say this one more time, and you want to support tonight's fundraiser, or really if you're a member of the LSA, it is mandatory to throw in a minimum $5 donation to this fundraiser. This fundraiser is for Revive Soldiers of Ukraine, which is helping to save the lives of Ukrainian soldiers that have been wounded in the line of service on the battlefield against the Russian Federation, and all support would be greatly appreciated, especially by the entirety of the Lee Spring Army, as mighty and as strong as it has shown itself to be over 3 entire years. And the donations are rolling into the fundraiser.
Man, they're coming in fast now, man. It looks like we have 500 left to go to hit that $3,000 goal, so it's going fast now.
Man, it is absolutely killing it right now. It's insane even. And look at it go. It's going. And I bet you someone's about to throw in like a several $100 donation in a second. It's going to hit 3,000 instantly. But while the general order goes absolutely ham, and we hit $3,000, because I know we will at this point, general orders have never failed. I mean, we're now only like $300 away, $250 actually now. Actually, no, we're less than that. We're about $150 away now.
Oh, dang.
Damn. Like it's getting there, man. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, we're going to hit it here in just a second, man. The general orders, they always hit hard. Oh, NDL threw in a 50. Oh, we did it. We did it.
Oh, we hit the goal. Let's go. Jaga, jaga, Eagle.
Let's go,
man,
baby.
Another goal smashed on a Sunday. I'm telling you what, I love to see it.
Man, we love to see it. $3,200. Oh, my goodness. $3,400 has been raised on the fundraiser. We literally raised $1,000 in like 30 seconds right there. That is absolutely incredible. And the Lee Spring Army is once again showing that it will never truly die, and that it will always support Ukraine and Western interests around the entirety of the globe. Y'all all deserve a massive amount of thanks and a massive amount of appreciation for this, because y'all are the people who make this thing possible every single time. It's truly incredible, truly amazing, and I got to give y'all a huge thanks for that, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to help out the people in Ukraine like we have been for so long. Every single Sunday, this channel comes together, and every single Sunday, this channel does things that can only be described as the stuff of legend. No channel has ever been able to support Ukraine this much every single week, and it's truly amazing to see that we've been able to do this all once again, sending this thing to the moon. And so a huge thanks to y'all all once again. And you know what, Matthew? You know what? As a little bit of a special segment, considering that we sent the fundraiser to the moon, maybe we ought to move over to the United States today to let y'all know of a massive accomplishment that the entirety of the United States and also the Western world can be incredibly proud of today. Before we move on into giving a huge shout out to everyone who has supported the fundraiser tonight and the top donors and everything, I want to make sure that we get to a story that I included that isn't war news, but it's news that is major, at least in its scientific and technological advancements that it made today. And many of y'all know what we're about to move on down to. It is Boca Chica in Texas. Now, a lot of people do know about the interesting kinds of technological advancements that have been made in space travel very recently here in the United States with a company called SpaceX. SpaceX is one of the forefront leading rocketry organizations, or really institutions here in the United States at this point, developing and designing some of the most cutting edge and technologically advanced rocket systems that have been seen in the world, especially here in America. And America, of course, being the forefront of rocketry technology, this is top of the line stuff. But there is a new kind of contender that is starting to enter the world out there, and it is the Starship. The Starship is something that is truly an incredible kind of a system. To explain what it is really quickly before we actually get to the picture, it is the largest rocket that has ever been designed in the world so far in history. The thing is massive. The amount of tonnage that the actual Starship can carry into orbit and to other celestial bodies like the Moon and Mars is larger than any other rocket that has ever been launched as well. It is truly an amazing thing. And just to give you a little bit of an idea of scale, here is the Starship, at least on an infographic, compared to the Saturn V, the SLS, the Falcon Heavy, which is considered one of the largest rockets to be launched from the United States currently, and the Space Shuttle. So you can get an idea that this thing is absolutely massive. It is literally the biggest rocket that has ever been launched. It probably will be, for a while, the biggest rocket that has ever been launched. The thing's huge, and I can't get it out there enough how important this thing is going to be in the future. Because many people are starting to talk about the idea, and I want to put this out there, this is still largely kind of in a bit of a conceptual phase or a concept phase, not really an actual thing that's out there, but a lot of people are starting to talk about asteroid mining and other kinds of mining projects that could be conducted near to Earth to help out with resource gathering that's starting to become somewhat difficult sometimes for certain kinds of resources here on the actual planet. And it's believed that Starship in the future not only will help to set up colonies on places like the Moon and Mars, but may even be able in the future to help out with producing resource colonies on these planets to help bring back additional resources here to Earth for us to continue to operate with. It's a pretty big thing when you think about it in the big picture, especially on a strategic picture, and for this reason, these kinds of advancements are not only important in the form of exploration, but they actually have a meaningful kind of an impact on what America may look like in the decades coming down the road. Now, the Starship is something that has never been done before. To explain a little bit of how it works, the Starship is an entirely reusable rocket. The Space Shuttle technically wasn't entirely reusable and was also very difficult to reuse efficiently, so while it was reusable, it kind of really wasn't. If you look at the deep details of it, it really wasn't. The Starship is supposed to be completely reusable. The heavy booster that it uses to launch the Starship into orbit is able to re-enter the atmosphere, reach the launch pad, and then be grabbed by the launch pad itself, ready to be reused a second time without really a lot of maintenance or upkeep needed to be able to do that. The Starship itself is also reusable as well. It's able to be used as the actual landing vehicle on a foreign planet, and it's also able to be used in a re-entry of the Earth in its entirety and able to either land it right now in the ocean in its test, or it's able to land at an actual pad and be used once again immediately after it was to land. It's a pretty impressive kind of a system. It's very out there, at least in what it's supposed to do, because just to put this out there, really no other part of any other rocket is reusable. The Saturn V, the entire thing is pretty much a wash. All of it's either destroyed re-entering the atmosphere, or it's just destroyed by its impact with the ground. It's not really reusable ever again, so it's a one-time use sort of a system. The SLS largely will be as well. Now, the external rockets attached to the SLS, the solid rocket boosters, those are technically reusable, but they still require a lot of maintenance to be able to do that, so not really an entirely reusable system. The Falcon Heavy is 100% reusable, well, at least most of it is 100% reusable, and the Space Shuttle was also a little bit reusable as well. But to show y'all what happened today, the first orbital test launch of the Starship was conducted today in Starship Flight 5, and we were actually able to see a little bit of footage, just to give y'all a recap here, of its launch, its orbital test, and the landing of the heavy booster, and also the Starship itself. So here's a quick little clip of the actual launch taken from a drone that was above the launch site. And I gotta tell you, man, while this isn't war news, this is absolutely crazy to see something like this actually going to space.
It's incredible to see it. And also the fact that the private industry is the one spearheading this is also quite interesting as well, because, you know, we're always used to NASA being the one spearheading stuff. Like, they were responsible for the space race, how fast we advanced in that. But to see SpaceX leading the charge in it, it's pretty unique and pretty cool. I would still personally like to see NASA being funded by American tax dollars to be doing it, but I will give credit to SpaceX. They've done a really good job.
I would have to agree. It's been a really impressive job. And also, to show y'all something else, after the launch, of course, it reaches its orbital apogee, or at least the kind of trajectory it needs to be able to reach an orbital trajectory, or an orbit around the Earth. And then we saw that the heavy booster, of course, disconnected and began to re-enter the atmosphere. I want to put this out there again. This is the first time that the heavy booster is re-entering the atmosphere and attempting to land at the pad. According to really how rocketry works, this is never supposed to work the first time. It's always supposed to end up blowing up. That's something that a lot of people don't know, and that's something that's kind of annoyed me a lot with people saying SpaceX sucks because all their rockets blow up. Because if you ever go back and look at NASA during the Apollo program, literally every rocket blew up except for the ones that actually had astronauts on them. Like, that's just a fact. You can go back and look at that. That's just rocketry. And rocketry is filled with endless failure until you end up actually having success. But this was the first attempt of landing the heavy booster and actually having it caught by the launch platform's arm. So I want y'all to keep that in mind, because the chances of this actually succeeding on the first try was literally like 1%. But here's the clip of it actually succeeding.
See how fast this vehicle is moving on the left hand screen.
Landing burn has been ignited. We're now down to 3 Raptor engines. We can see those chopsticks now in view.
And it actually worked.
Megadilla has caught the booster.
Man, that is like so crazy, like to see that thing coming down like that.
It is.
Can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah, I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, I was making sure because it went dead silent there for a second. But it's so crazy to see that coming down like that because, you know, we take the technology for granted, but the fact that we can land something that size into literally robot arms like that and actually reuse it is just really insane. Like that, the humans can actually manufacture and develop something that advanced is really wild. Like you see it on here, but the amount of work that really went into that is unbelievable, and the amount of money as well. It's crazy to see it actually like in reality.
It is. It's unbelievably impressive, and I want people to keep this in mind, because I don't know why some people say things like this. I've been seeing people saying this, a whole bunch of hate against SpaceX because of the person who is attached to SpaceX, which is Elon Musk. I want to remind y'all of something really quickly. You don't have to like the people who are in charge of organizations like the U.S. government or SpaceX to be proud of the accomplishments of the United States of America and all the people who are involved with this. There are actually people who are working for SpaceX right now that are watching this channel that we know of, and they are some of the people who were involved, some of them actually working out at Boca Chica, who made this thing possible. This is the collective effort of hundreds of thousands of Americans that have come together to be able to make such a thing like this possible. Not just one person. This is the accomplishments of this entire republic that we live in at this moment. This is one of the most impressive things that has ever been technologically achieved on the face of this planet. Y'all just saw it right there. And it truly is a testament and a feat for the entirety of the nation to celebrate that this was possible. It's really a reflection of all of us, really, with what this is able to do and what we're able to all come together and accomplish on a daily basis. It's something that's well and entirely impressive. It's something that is even more impressive than the Apollo program that sent us to the moon. This thing will be sending us not only to the moon, but to Mars as well, and on missions that are honestly far more important, at least in their scale and scope, than the Apollo projects ever were. It's an absolutely incredible thing, and I've got to say that it is an amazing feat by the company SpaceX, and also an amazing feat by the United States of America, considering that every single rocket scientist that is working on this project, along with the engineers and everyone else involved, are all American citizens. It is truly an absolutely incredible thing, and you just cannot say it enough. It is an absolutely amazing feat. I wish at this point we had a quick little Star Spangled Banner that we could whip over to at the moment, like we have in our intro sometimes, but I don't have one lined up, because honestly, it makes me proud to be an American to see these kinds of things happening. It really does make you proud to live in this country because it's able to do such incredible things all the time. But moving on from that, we
also, by the way, I see some people saying that talking about Elon Musk, he's not the one that built this. He just pays the people, and the credit should go to them. That is true. Like, the people at his company are the ones that actually did the heavy lifting, like actually designing and engineering the thing. But you still have to give Musk his credit on this. I know people don't like his personality and stuff like that. I get that, but at the same time, without the leader of the company, Musk, who founded it, that company would not be developing this stuff right now. And there has to be a leader. And remember this, folks. Henry Ford was a very, very somewhat dual-sided individual. It had a bad side to him and a good side as well. His bad side was really bad. Like, if you know anything about the history of Henry Ford, it was a somewhat a really, really bad side, but he did create one of the most successful auto manufacturers in the world, and people don't deride Ford just because Henry Ford had a bad side to him. They just simply think, okay, the guy had some really bad problems, but he built a really good company. The same credit has to go to Musk as well, because without his leadership in that company, it would not be being accomplished right now, what we just saw right there, because no other company is doing that right now except for SpaceX, and Musk started it. So I'll have to give him his credit on this one, regardless of what y'all think about his personality. That is a feat.
I would have to give a credit to SpaceX, Elon Musk, and everyone who was involved in this project, because they all came together to make this possible, and it reflects incredibly well on the United States of America as a whole. Every single one of y'all, every single person living here, and the idea of our nation as well. We are not only the masters of our nation, the masters of the seas around the world, the master of the skies around the world, having the largest navy and also the largest air force seeing the world over. We are also the masters of space as well, able to really bend it to whatever we need it to be and to be able to create the technology possible to do so. No other country has the credit of doing such a thing. No one has even come close. Everyone else is living in the shadows of what America and the Western world has been able to achieve combined. The Chinese and the Russians are always just trying to catch up to the glory that is the Western world and what we are able to do. Russia and China are just trying to emulate what we did with the Apollo program, which was 50 years ago. And we are racing ourselves right now in America to figure out how we're going to get to Mars the quickest. That is something that, when you think about it, truly is crazy. And that is why I'm honestly always proud to be an American citizen and always proud to say that the Western world is the best part of the world there is, because we do things that no one else can. And we do it because we largely believe in ourselves, and we have the ability to work as hard as physically possible to make these things a reality each and every single day. And so with that, let me quickly show you all the other clip that we have right here of the Starship actually re-entering the atmosphere. This is the actual Starship conducting an orbital test right here. So this thing has crossed the Kármán line and is orbiting the Earth, and it is going to re-enter the atmosphere and splash down into the ocean, which in itself is also a crazy and amazing feat that it did this successfully as well. And so we can see the Starship here orbiting the Earth. We can also see the flaps as it's re-entering the atmosphere. We can see the glow of the heat and the friction of the atmosphere as it's now re-entering. We can also see the wings, or really the flaps, at work on the side of the belly of the Starship.
You know, the conspiracy theorists are going to say this was filmed in a Hollywood studio.
Oh yeah, you know it, man. But the conspiracy theorists can eat it, because what was done today was absolutely amazing. I mean, it truly was.
Landing bird startup.
And we now see the landing sequence starting up as the Starship whips itself down into the atmosphere and will land in the ocean here in a second. And you see the ocean below it as it splashes down into the sea.
Starship has landed.
And then plops on down into the water right there.
We have a ship in the water.
And that right there was the successful re-entry and landing of an intact Starship vessel. That is absolutely amazing. Not only did the heavy booster recover successfully, but the Starship did as well. It is an amazing feat. I can't say that enough. This is something that y'all will remember, and this is something that will be in the history books here in the future, that the Starship launch and the Starship program was amazing as success that propelled the United States into the next age of space travel, a far more affordable and realistic phase of space travel than ever had been seen before. And y'all were here to witness this on this very day. An absolutely incredible thing to think about. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip right there and the amazing thing that happened here in America today, the really technological success that happened today. And we're going to be moving on now into something else that's very important that's happened tonight that is, of course, historical. We have raised $4,205, almost $2,000 from the general order alone on this fundraiser. Absolutely
Fantastic.
crazy. And of course, we got to give a shout out to all of the top donors. We would give a shout out to every single person, whether your donation is $1 or $1,000 or anywhere in between or even more than that. But of course, there are so many of y'all who support these fundraisers each and every day. It would be very hard to call off every single person, regardless the size. So we kind of relegated to everyone above 50, but I want everyone to know that through in a donation below 50, that y'all are the folks that made half of this thing possible. And while we will be calling out top donors, if it wasn't for the hundreds, if not thousands of people who throw in $1, $5, and $10 donations, everything up to a 50, this fundraiser would only be half the size it is. While we can't call each and every one of y'all off individually and give y'all a huge moment of thanks as well, y'all are as big and equal a part of these fundraisers and our ability to help out Ukraine as everyone else was that was in the top donor list. And I want to give y'all all a huge thanks for that. But Matthew, take it away.
All right, so calling off our top donors of the night on this fundraiser, we've had some very big ones tonight, and our biggest donation of the night is going to go to LSA Rocks. He put in a $500 donation, by far the largest of the night, and huge shout out to LSA Rocks for that very generous support of the fundraiser. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go out of order here for just a moment, because Bubba Conway just threw in a $42 donation, and also Patrol put in a $50 as well. A huge shout out to both Bubba and Patrol for that support of the fundraiser. And moving back to our list here, we also had a $250 from Nicholas Condor, who's the second largest of the night, along with AJ, who put in a $125, and then we had a $100 from some guy called The Enforcer, as well as a $100 from Greg Carrier. Also, Al P threw in a $100 along with Neil Vizanant. Also, Peace with War, Hal Rose, BC Skyman, and Andy L. And then LSA Rocks threw in another $100 donation, bringing his total up to $600 thrown into the fundraiser. Absolutely tremendous, by the way. And then we had a $50 from John King, Ted Mitchell, Skip Tracer 007, as well as Mike Smith, Avari Mandabratis, as well as What 42, as well as a $50 from Randy Tosto and a $50 from Andy L, and also Ted Marshall. And once again, like the Enforcer said, huge shout out to everybody that's donated tonight. Even if we were not able to call your name off, it really does mean a lot to Ukraine and also us that the donations have come in once again and smashed the goal all the way through. So once again, huge shout out to everybody tonight for that generosity. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to give a huge thanks to all of y'all once again, because if it was not for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to make these fundraisers possible. We wouldn't be able to make the support that we send over to Ukraine a reality. It's all of y'all that make this thing a reality. Every single one of y'all's names that we called off, and so many more that we aren't able to call off. If y'all weren't around and weren't able to support these fundraisers, the LSA would be nothing more than just a name. Y'all give the kind of really like the essence of the LSA. Y'all are the people who make that possible. Y'all are the ones who make it possible for the LSA to actually have something behind it other than just a name. It actually is an organization that helps out in Ukraine, and y'all are the folks who make that possible each and every night. And so with that, I got to give a huge thanks to y'all all once again for making sure to support this fundraiser tonight and help us to reach such amazing and lofty goals in this fundraiser, because once again, all of that support is going to be going over to Revive Soldiers of Ukraine to help them to save the lives of another Ukrainian soldier, which is going to be absolutely amazing. But before we move on from that,
Enforcer, real quick, one more thing as well. I did see two more donations come in, and also I saw an anonymous donation come in earlier for $333 that came in earlier, and also I saw BC Skyman say, was that Hal Rose? I really don't know. It said anonymous on it, but Hal Rose typically is the one throwing in the $333 donation, and he did throw in another one tonight, so I don't know if that was maybe a second one from Hal or not, but Hal, let us know, because we will give you credit for that. I think YouTube might have robbed you of your credit because it said anonymous, but good catch, BC. And also, huge shout out to Bubba Conway for throwing in a $69 donation, nice, as well as Old Warrior, who threw in a $50 as well. Once again, huge shout out to you two for that generosity, and also, Enforcer, take it away.
And I gotta say, once again, a huge thanks to everyone. But before we move on, I do want to bring up some, because I saw some people saying NASA has never failed with rocketry or something along those lines, because I brought up that people kind of deride SpaceX for having rockets that blow up. And I was like, all rockets blow up. And then some people said, no, they don't. So let me just remind you all of the Challenger explosion really quickly. I think that's probably like the best example. Like, people actually died in that one. And also, let me show you all this, because this is something that people may or may not know. But rockets actually did blow up a lot back in the day. This was the early days of NASA. I'm actually going to mute that. But these are some of the clips from the early days of NASA and some of their earliest rocket tests. Kind of like the SpaceX teething phase of NASA. Just to give you all a little bit of an idea of what it really looked like back in the day. Like it was not all sunshine and rainbows. I mean, stuff was blowing up everywhere because everyone was trying to figure out how the stuff even worked at all, or if it would even be a viable option. I mean, literally everything was blowing up. Here's another one that's going to end up literally having critical motor failure on the pad and detonate on the pad. These are like some of the worst case scenarios that you can have because there's massive damage that also happens to the pad as well, and the pad's actually kind of difficult to repair sometimes, especially certain components of it. But there's just a load of examples, endless examples of rocket failures. I mean, insane amount.
Oh, that's a lovely one right there.
Yeah, I mean,
that was about to become a ballistic missile, basically.
dude, that thing almost turned into an S-300 right there. It's like, dang, man. But yeah, I mean, there's an endless amount of failures that always happen in rocketry. It's honestly just kind of the name of the game in rocketry. You build them, test them, they usually blow up a load, and then you eventually improve it enough to where it actually works in practice. And when people say it's not rocket science, I'll be honest with y'all, like rocket science is incredibly difficult and complicated, but even then, it really becomes a lot of trial and error and just trying things out and seeing if they work, and then when they don't work, you have to kind of fix it on the fly, rebuild the entire system again, and then test it again, and then it will probably fail again. And you see right here, of course, this one failed. It actually had a motor explosion, and so I believe they remote detonated this one as well. Usually that's kind of like the go-to thing. Actually, it doesn't look like this one remote detonated. It looks like the exhaust actually enveloped the craft itself. And so then it detonated that way. But y'all can get the idea. I'm not going to play the whole clip here. Y'all can get a pretty good idea that rocketry largely is filled with failures until there's singular successes. And then you work on that exact formula. You don't mess with the success. You don't try and modify it or improve it in really any way. You just keep working with that success, and then you keep running with it. But anyways, with that, also someone said technology has come light years away from that, so they should not blow up as much. Oh, you sweet summer child. Yeah, that sounds like that would make sense, but in the rocketry world, it doesn't really matter. Like, it just does not. Because sometimes it's technical things like an O-ring is too small or it's too big, or the motor had a coolant failure and you need to find out how to be able to make the motors more efficiently. It's not always about the rocket science side of things. Sometimes it's just about the trial and error of it. A lot of people also don't know this as well. Like, internal combustion engines that you have in your car are a really fine-tuned thing. Like, very rarely does one just come out of the design shop working fine. Like, there's a huge design process that is involved in creating a brand new engine, even for a car. And once they figure that out, and once it meets the certain specifications they're looking for, they mass produce that engine in that exact way that that prototype existed when it ran the most optimally. And then that's the engine that goes into every single car from that point forward. It's kind of like how light bulbs were made. There was literally hundreds of different filaments used in light bulbs until they found out that, I believe it was carbon filaments worked the best, and so then they went with carbon filaments from that point forward, and then they changed a little while after that. But nevertheless, loads and loads of failure is always had in the process of innovation. It's a very resource consumptive kind of a process. So whenever I see failures like that, I don't see it as being like an abysmal failure. It's really just a part of innovation. Things always fail. I mean, the first steam engines in the world, they blew up loads. I mean, people were legitimately scared to get near a steam engine because it could just explode and kill you. And then eventually
That's why I don't understand why people are so anxious to get on rockets to like go to space for tourism purposes. Like, for example, Bezos getting on his own rocket. It's like, that's one of the first generation rockets of its type, and you're willing to like jump on the thing and just go right to space. There's always going to be like things going wrong with those rockets, like, and they can easily blow up. It's literally like a big like propane tank, explosive propane tank you're riding on to the orbit. And I don't understand why people were so anxious to get on those, because me personally, I wouldn't. It's like the early days of like air travel, like on airliners. Of course, there's going to be a lot more accidents then because people are still trying to iron out the kinks. And who wants to be one of the people that has the kinks ironed out on them? I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that either. And a lot of people don't get that. Like with the Titan submersible, it's like those people died like kind of like in literally the first tourist submarine that ever existed. It's not even a tried and true thing, you know, like that. And someone just brought that up in the chat. Yeah, Tom X-Men, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That, like, submarines have been made to dive to that level, but they're very specific and they're only made really for one person to be in. The Titan submersible was the first deep dive submarine like that had been made big enough to carry tourists down to that level. and it blew up on them and killed everyone. Like, it's like when things are brand new, they are bound to fail because all of the mistakes haven't been learned yet for people to develop off of that. That's why when you look at things like the aviation industry, you will see that at the dawn of the aviation industry, it went from having literally no regulations whatsoever and anyone could buy a plane and fly it, to now in the modern day, the amount of regulations are endless, not only on the design of aircraft and the minimum requirements of an aircraft manufacturing wise, but how they're flown, how people interact with them, how everything works. There are loads of regulations, and all of those regulations were put into place because people got injured or people got killed, and then the lessons had to be learned that way, because until then no one even knew there was a problem to be had until someone got wounded or killed. So that's kind of, always the thing. I don't know why people, maybe it's because people don't have to deal with that or don't read the history about that, so they don't really know that that's the way things are. But that is always how things are. Like the Starship, like, just to let y'all know this, and people are going to act like it's shocking when it happens, the Starship will eventually blow up with people on board, and it will eventually kill people who are on board a Starship, or it'll end up blowing up a cargo on board or something along those lines. But nevertheless, it will blow up. People are going to act like, oh my God, how could it blow up? This is a disaster. Elon's an idiot, or something like that. It will happen because guess what? Every single plane flying in the world, at least one of its kind, that's if the airplane's been flying for more than 10 years, it's crashed and a load of people died on it, because that's always what happens. And then they'll go back and the NTSB will go, oh my God, like there's a design flaw, like the freaking cargo door just blows out because it's not pressurized. Who would have thought? We need these to be pressurized now. We need the locks to be changed. All this kind of stuff, because that's just how it works. Like, and I cannot hit that home enough. Like, if a starship blows up, I'm not going to be like one of the people out there who's kind of like a clown going, oh my God, the starship needs to retire, because that's ridiculous. Everything has crashed, everything's blown up. It is what it is, and hopefully people will learn from it and it won't happen again. But that's how it always is. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. But with that, it's time for us to actually get to a couple of questions. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right. And also, by the way, huge shout out to Gene Kustra, who put in a $100 donation to the fundraiser, by the way, and brought us up to about 4,600 raised.
Dang.
We're about to get close to 5,000 raised on the fundraiser, which is tremendous because our goal is only 3,000. So almost 2,000 above goal. But with that, we're jumping into our first question of the night, which is going to go to Darth Karn, who says, are we going to get details, the real facts on what happened in the UN base in southern Lebanon? Because there's conflicting reports from both sides.
From what we know, I'll explain what it was. From what we know, there was a indication that there may have been Hezbollah activity near this base. The Israelis rolled in and they told the UN forces to move out. I believe the UN forces refused to move out. I think this was actually an Irish UN contingent and they're still refusing to move out. And so the Israelis just started to roll through the base like they weren't there. I think that's what happened with the incident, if I know the story correctly. But Matthew, do you know a different story?
So you are correct. One thing that is a crucial fact that people are leaving out in this entire story is they were told to leave the area, the UN peacekeepers. They apparently did not obey the order, according to the story that's being told by the Israelis, and apparently they got caught up in it, and that's why a couple of the UN peacekeepers got killed. Also, something else. I saw a video today. I'm not sure if it's veracity or not, but based on what I'm seeing, it looks like Hezbollah was literally hiding out just a couple hundred feet away from where the UN peacekeepers were. So I don't know what's up with this. Like, there's some fishy stuff that goes on in this area. I'm not sure why the Hamas or Hezbollah forces are that close to the UN peacekeepers. It looks a little fishy to me, but I don't have any concrete facts to make a correct or a direct correlation to it, but it looks fishy. But one thing's for certain here, based on what I'm seeing, there's no fault on Israel whatsoever. They did the proper things by notifying people to get out of the area, and apparently nobody listened. So, it's ultimately on the organization to follow the orders.
Yeah, that's kind of what we know at the moment. I would have to generally say that's kind of stupid for UN, for the UN. Well, really, like, let me clarify this. The UN isn't like an army. That's something that a lot of people misunderstand. The UN gives out contracts to independent countries. And right now, down in the border area, there are 3 countries that are holding this place down. It's the Italians, the Ghanaians, like some of y'all are like, what the hell's the Ghanaians? The Ghanaians are from Ghana, and that is this country right here. So the UN gave a contract to the country of Ghana to send a contingent of their armed forces to Lebanon and to hold down a specific area. It's right here on this little provincial border, and the Ghanaians hold this area down. The Italians have the very western side of the coast near Tyre, and then the Irish have the area around Maroun El Raz, right around here. So these are the 3 groups that are there right now. The Ghanaians and the Italians, when given the order to withdraw by the Israelis because they were moving in, they actually followed the request, and they moved 5 kilometers back off the border. The Irish refused. So then when the Israelis move in, they're sitting there and they're seeing UN peacekeepers sitting around, and now they're in a war zone, which UN peacekeepers are not supposed to be in. And some people are going to be like, wait a minute, what do you mean the peacekeepers aren't supposed to be in a war zone? They're technically not supposed to be. They're there to hold down the peace and like domestic internal situations in countries that are pretty much out of control. They're not really there to engage and fight enemy forces from an invading enemy country. That's something that a lot of people don't understand about UN peacekeepers. And then even still, they don't really do a lot in domestic situations because the UN rules of engagements are so strict that the UN literally cannot do anything almost most of the time, even if they're being fired on. So it's really weird how that works. But moving on from that, the Israelis moved in. The Irish were still there. They get fired on. The Israelis fire back, and they end up killing a couple of them and then roll through their base. And then everyone wants to go, oh my God, what are they doing? Israel doesn't respect the UN and the peacekeepers. They're killing them. And it's like the peacekeepers aren't even supposed to be there, first off. They're supposed to have moved out. It's really stupid to sit there and keep the peacekeepers in an active war zone and then act like it's crazy that they're getting shot. Like that's going to happen. Like that would happen if it was the other way around and the UN peacekeepers were in northern Israel and then Hezbollah started to roll into northern Israel. They get shot. That's how it works. So I hope that does address that fairly well. This story is really being blown way out of proportion to what it really is, because like it's common sense. They're not supposed to be in a war zone. Like there's a million different instances where UN peacekeepers had to pack up and move because a war zone was coming to them. And so I don't really know
The
why.
misinformation being spread on it is insane. Like it honestly really pisses me off to see the misinformation on it. And of course, it's intentional. It's designed to make it look like the IDF is going out and killing peacekeepers. And of course, to people that really don't know what's really happening over there, when they hear, "Oh my God, the IDF is killing peacekeepers," it makes the IDF and Israel sound like absolutely evil people. And that's the intention behind it. Is they're trying to paint Israel like it's some kind of rogue evil state that's going around just killing random people trying to keep the peace. When in actuality, that is nowhere near the full story, and not all the details are getting out. Now, I have no idea why certain like news organizations are trying to paint it like that. It makes no sense. And these are some of the biggest names in news around the world trying to paint it like Israel is the evil one here, when Israel is giving the proper notification to these organizations to get out of the way, and yet they're not getting out of the way. So, I'm not faulting Israel for that, and I don't really see an argument for doing that.
Also, I see some people saying, Israel does not have power over the UN. No, they don't. But when you're in a developing war zone and they tell you move because it's a war zone now, it's not actually a domestic internal affair inside of Lebanon. This is now a war zone. You're supposed to move. That's kind of the rule, because that's also what happens with the UN down in places like Africa. Like, for example, let's say, let me think. If an official government says in Central Africa, hey, we're about to be moving our army into this area, we need y'all to get out of the way, UN peacekeepers usually pack up and move. That's kind of the rule. Like, I don't think a lot of people understand this or get this, and I'm seeing some people in the chat not getting this. The UN isn't supposed to sit there and tell Israel, no, you're not going to invade because we don't want you to. If Israel says we're invading, the UN just has to go, okay. And then if they say we're invading here, we need y'all to move, they're supposed to go, okay. And they're supposed to pack up and move. That's the rule. Like, that's why the Italians and the Ghanaians did that immediately, because they got forward notice. Like the Israelis said, we're moving 5 kilometers into Lebanon. We need y'all to move. And as soon as the Italians and the Ghanaians heard that, they went, okay, and they packed up and they moved. And then the Irish went, no, we're not. And then when the Israelis roll in and they're still there, and then for some reason, from what we know, we don't really know this part of the story well, but apparently the UN peacekeepers may have started firing at the Israelis, and then the Israelis fired back and ended up killing a couple of them. That's kind of what happens. They're not supposed to be there. Like, I don't think people are getting that. Also, VC Slim said, UN doesn't take orders from Israel, I hope. No, they don't, but you still aren't getting it. If you're in a war zone as a UN peacekeeper, there's something wrong. You're not supposed to be in a war zone. Like, you're supposed to be there to be keeping the peace. If the peace devolves to where it's impossible to keep it and a sovereign country is now invading another sovereign country, then you're not supposed to be there. You're supposed to leave. That's the rule. Like, that is the rule. And people aren't getting this. The UN doesn't exist as the UN. These are independent countries that are taking contract jobs as peacekeepers. They're practically UN mercenaries. There are 3 different groups of UN mercenaries that were at this area. Italian mercenaries, Ghanaian mercenaries, and Irish mercenaries. When the Israelis gave notice to those 3 governments that they were moving 5 kilometers into Lebanon and they need to order their mercenaries to move back, the Italians and the Ghanaians immediately agreed and they moved them back. That's what UN procedure requires. That's what they did. The Irish decided to refuse, and the Irish ended up doing kind of a stupid move, because now those peacekeepers are in the middle of a war zone right now. Like, they are there still, and now it's a whole big hoopla that they didn't move. They were supposed to move. Also, Israel, also a country in the world, is not supposed to adapt their war plans around the inefficiency of the UN. Just putting that out there. If there were UN peacekeepers in Ukraine and Russia said to, let's say, Singaporean peacekeepers here near Kharkiv, like 3 hours before the invasion actually begins, we're going to invade the Kharkiv Oblast. We need y'all to move about 20 miles back. The Singaporeans aren't supposed to go, no, they're going to get blasted. Like, they're going to get blasted at that point, and there's nothing stopping that. That's the thing that people aren't getting. When the UN peacekeepers here, we're going to start blasting people, we need y'all to move, they're supposed to move. Like, that's the rule, whether you like one side or not. That's not for the UN to decide. They're just supposed to pack up and leave. And they didn't leave, and then they got shot, and then they want to make a big deal out of it and make it sound like the Israelis are some bad devil because they told them in advance that they're moving in, please move back, and then they refused to move back, and then the Israeli offensive plan went forward like clockwork on the timetable that they laid out, and they were still there, and then they ended up getting shot because apparently, from what we know, there was some kind of a skirmish, and the Israelis either got shot at or the UN peacekeepers weren't properly identified, and in a quick moment's notice, they got shot. One way or the other. It is what it is. So I hope that addresses that well. And I'm still seeing, let's see. Here we go. Let's see. How could a peacekeeping army function if one of the disputing parties... No, you're not understanding, Christopher. That isn't a disputing party. Israel isn't a disputing party. The UN peacekeepers were there for a domestic internal Lebanese affair. That's what you're not understanding. They're not there to stop Israel from invading Lebanon. They're there to stop Hezbollah from operating south of the Litani River. That's why they're there. They're not there to stop the Israelis from moving in. They're there to try and stop Hezbollah from overriding a UN resolution and moving south of the Litani. And then we see that Hezbollah forces are south of the Litani thicker than thieves, and so they're not even doing their job there. And so when the Israelis move in, they're supposed to leave. Like, they're not there to stop the Israelis from moving in. They're there to stop the Hezbollah forces from being there, and they didn't even do that. And so when they move in and you don't move out, you get shot, and that is what it is. Like, that's like saying, oh my God, like, there's like like, let's say this is probably the best instance I can give. Oh my God, there's a shooting going on at a public venue. The cops, the SWAT team is coming through this area of the venue I'm in. Instead of just complying to their orders in this very high intensity, stressful scenario where they don't know who's who and who is actually shooting, let me grab from my phone in my pocket and quickly jerk it out so that way I can film this for my own personal safety. You will probably be shot by the police at that point, because that's not really good common sense at that specific time in that kind of a scenario. And that's kind of the scenario that is going on right now with the UN, is that the Israeli army is moving in to deal with Hezbollah that the UN did not deal with. That's what they were there to deal with. And so then when they move in, and then when the UN refuse, well, really the Irish peacekeepers only, refuse to move, and then they're in a war zone, and because a war zone's a war zone, they get shot. They can't complain. They were told to move, and they didn't. This isn't their fight. They're not supposed to be stopping the Israelis. They're supposed to be stopping Hezbollah. They didn't do that. The Israelis are now having to deal with the problem, and then they wanted to stay. It happens. Like, that's all I can say. But anyways, with that, I feel like I've beaten that one into the ground about enough. But we also have a little poll on this, and some people are asking to fund the UN. Seems like a lot of people are maybe in support of that. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so it's a very controversial question, it seems like, in the live chat. Defund the UN, question mark. This is a question, and it looks like 58% of the audience said yes, the UN should be defunded, while 42% said no. So the underlying assumption here is, can the UN be fixed or can it not be fixed? Because I think most people will agree the UN is broken for the most part. It's not really functioning in the way it was intended, or at least in my opinion, it's in the modern day, and it seems to be also going really far off course from what we intended it to be used for. For example, Russia sits on the Security Council, and they can veto pretty much anything they want on the UN Security Council. Also, we see the UN peacekeepers running around acting like a PMC, and also there's an absolute clown in charge of the UN right now who says things sort of like on the fence about whether or not the terror forces are in the right or wrong when it comes to attacking a sovereign country. So the UN is just out of control. I don't like that organization one bit, and it's just rogue in my opinion. I say defund the whole thing. I don't think it's fixable, and it's really not needed at this point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. It's administratively, diplomatically, and bureaucratically useless on every level. It doesn't even really need to exist because pretty much everything is done outside of the UN anyway. So I would have to say I don't really like them that much. I have honestly find them to be useless. Like, that would be my personal opinion. Also, on top of that, if people find it to be unacceptable that Hezbollah is in southern Lebanon, shouldn't that be shouldn't we just make, instead of trying to find out how to make the UN do it and then give out contracts to foreign countries to go down there and do this job, wouldn't it just be better if a multinational coalition was made to enforce a unified agreement, like, instead of going to the UN and doing it? And also, let me go and hit this home because some people still aren't getting this. Let me go grab this really quickly. I got to show y'all this. So, UN peacekeepers, they're not the army of the United Nations. So many people get this wrong, and it's always so exhausting to talk to people who believe that the United Nations is like an army. It's not an army. They give out contracts. The UN does not have a standing armed force. You see these guys right here? You see them? Guess what they are? They're not UN. They're Spanish. You can see that on the flag right there. But they're given a contract. The UN gives out a contract and pays a government, a national government of a country in the world, money to send a certain amount of soldiers somewhere and to have them just be there. That's what the UN does. They give them these nice little blue vests and these nice little blue helmets to show that they're working for the UN, but this is the Spanish army. Like, this is the Spanish army working a contract job for the UN. And so many people get this wrong. If you look at this soldier right here, this is a soldier of a different army. I actually can't see their patches to denote which country they're in, but this is, once again, not a UN army. This is a foreign country that has been contracted by the United Nations to do a job in a foreign country. Let's go to another one. This one right here. These guys are from Bangladesh, but they're operating for the UN. This is how it works. There is no such thing as a UN army. So the UN isn't going to unilaterally declare they're invading a country because they don't like them, because where the hell is their army? They're having to hire other people to do it. Like, let me go get another instance here. These guys, if I remember this flag correctly, they're South America. What country is that? Is that Bolivia? Let me go look. Dang, they don't have the flags. It might be Paraguay or Uruguay, maybe. But nevertheless, these guys are from South America, once again, contracted to do a UN job. That's what they do. Here's an Italian. That's an Italian UN member right there. But once again, well, not a UN member, but that's an Italian UN contractor right there. There is no such thing as a UN army. I have to hit that home because I've seen so many people say that in the chat. That's not a thing. They're literally mercenaries. They're UN mercenaries. That's really what they are. So I hope that addresses that the best I can. I hope that really hits that home incredibly well, because it's something that it's endless with people saying that there's a UN army. But anyways, moving on from that, and moving on into the rest of our news, we have a good bit of Middle East news, but considering that we're kind of running late on the news and we still have a lot to cover, we're going to kind of start speeding through it a little bit. We did get to see that rockets were fired at Haifa overnight, and that the Israelis did attempt interceptions and were able to intercept some of these rockets successfully, which we can see in this clip right here. And we see more interceptions being conducted. And that's the end of the clip, but still pretty interesting to see. Moving on from that, we did also get to see that unfortunately some of these rockets actually ended up hitting a base within the area around Haifa, and dozens ended up being wounded, with some of them critical. Well, you see in another clip here, some of the wounded being taken out of the area and to immediate medical assistance, considering that some of them were seriously wounded. In our next clip, we can also see some of them being helivaced out of the area and moved to Tel Aviv. And so with that, that's the end of the clip right there. And moving on from that, we were also able to see that within the southern area near Gaza, there were some major airstrikes that were conducted down here in the area around the former hospital, but where a strong Hamas buildup had been seen. We were also able to hear that a THAAD has been deployed to the Middle East, the second of its kind in the region, by the United States Department of Defense. And so moving on from that, we are waiting for the Israeli strike to occur on Iran. We don't know when, but we're still trying to keep an eye on it. Also, I saw Nicholas Condor say they are not mercenaries. That's true, but to really try and hit it home what they are and to detach them from being a UN army, that's why I use that wordage. Are they really mercenaries like Wagner? Absolutely not. But at the same time, they're not UN soldiers. Like, they're not fighting for the UN. Like, they didn't pledge like an allegiance to the UN or anything. They're a foreign country's army that's been paid money by the UN to go do something. So they're kind of in context of that, they kind of are mercenaries, because they're being paid by someone to go do something, and it's not even their own country that's asking them. It's some other third-party organization. But really, they're more like hired firepower. That's kind of the way to put it. Still kind of falls under a mercenary, but, you know, it is what it is. Anyways, moving on from that and on up into the Kursk area, we did get to see that the second day of the Russian offensive has not been going well, and a decent amount of Russian forces are still being lost from Ukrainian actions even today. Check this out. This Russian is about to have a nice little surprise.
This Ruski is gonna get fried up like fried green tomato blitz.
Oh, blittle. Oh, he threw an AK at a...
Oh. He remembered his drone training.
And Joshua...
Are they going to fry them up again? Oh, they jumped off the boats. Oh, dear.
And Joshua, this is... That's a dumb take. No. Because that's kind of
Thank you, Joshua, for your infinite wisdom.
Yeah, it's just... That's a dumb take. Doesn't explain nothing. Just says it. Absolute Chad-like right there. Real alpha. But anyways, we could see them continuing to conduct FPV attacks in the area.
I saw the... Oh, snap. It popped up on the screen. I saw it.
Man, really impressive right there. Really impressive stuff. And moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a super bison, a very rare super bison in the area. Check this thing out. Oh, we're going to be muting that.
Also, I saw Kuchulin say in the live chats, people always use the word mercenary like it's a slur, but I know some competent mercenary groups that are perfectly legitimate. And that is true. Like, honestly, we've used mercenaries, not me personally, like I'm not using Uber mercenary like that, but the U.S. has used mercenaries before. It hasn't gone good sometimes, like, for example, the Blackwater PMC. But once again, there are times we need to use mercenaries for certain operations. Also, the CIA uses contractors as well sometimes to go in to complete certain tasks. It's just something that all countries do to some extent, but I think the U.S. has sort of gotten away from it a little bit because of the Blackwater controversy. But there are competent mercenary groups out there that aren't bad. They're just independent from the government.
Well, as far as mercenaries go, a lot of people, a lot of people do put a negative connotation on mercenaries. Mercenaries as a thing like aren't bad. Like there are bad mercenary groups, but the idea of a mercenary just being bad because it's a mercenary is really bizarre to me, because historically mercenaries have always existed, and really sometimes they've actually been the preferred method of warfare, is just hiring mercenaries to do the job instead of getting your own people to do it. Like that's just kind of what it is. I mean, I don't really consider it a bad thing, but I want to, kind of like hammer it home that the UN doesn't have their own like homegrown little army they're running with. It's hired firepower from other people. And when you kind of get into the context of hired firepower, it kind of ends up being a mercenary. We'll actually pull this up. Definition of mercenary, just so that way we can get a little bit of clarity here. Let's see here. A professional soldier hired to serve in a foreign army. So if you want to put that definition, it is kind of, if you want to call the UN peacekeepers an army, which they are an armed force, so I suppose they may be construed as an army, then those people are mercenaries because they're being hired out from one country's army to another to serve as firepower. So that kind of is what a mercenary is. I would say, in my opinion, they are mercenaries. Doesn't mean that they're like bad people or, they're going to be conducting atrocities or anything like that, but they're just hired guns from somewhere else. So to me, that would be a mercenary.
Although pretty much all the Russian mercenaries, they do fit the bad description pretty much, like the Wagner PMC. They do fit that horrific, like when you think of like killers and fiends and criminals and stuff like that, they fit that description. But there are like legit ones in the West that aren't like a group of killers and convicts over here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a load of them. I mean, there's lots of PMCs out there. They're all over the place, or loads of mercenary groups out there. I mean, historically, mercenaries have actually been pretty highly sought after. Like, for example, the Swiss mercenaries that were famous during the Middle Ages, or the Landsknechts right after, or the Swiss again after that. I mean, hell, the Swiss kind of were like mercenaries for life up until like the 1815s. But beyond that, mercenaries have just been a thing. I mean, it's not bad. They're just like they're a thing that exists. Some of them are atrocious, like like Blackwater, like Wagner. Those are pretty atrocious mercenary groups. But then there's just others out there that just do their job and they get paid, and that's that. But moving on from that and into our location unknowns, we did get to see an FPV drone that didn't explode, and the Russians took a little film of this because they were pretty shocked by this.
Короче, брат, вот такая хуйня, я не знаю, что с ним делать.
Man, look, there it is back there. They're like,
Она он пищит еще, блядь. Ща, брат, посмотрим, она лежит там.
We see them showing off their little buhanka.
It's still here, bro.
They're like, well, look at that. He's in the big seat, your butt.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
Ебать фарт, нахуй.
And that's the end of that clip, but still pretty interesting to see. But moving on from that and into our next one, we also got to see a French-donated VAB in training with some Ukrainian forces. Pretty cool to see. Moving on from that, we also got to see an ATACMS launch at the Russians. Also, really quickly, someone else said something, and we gotta debunk that. Someone said, actually, UN peacekeepers are paid for by their home country. And no. Why in the world would anyone do peacekeeping if they're not getting paid? So let's see here. Peacekeepers, monitor and observe, blue berets, blue helmets. So, let's see. Most of these established and implemented troops, in these cases, peacekeepers remain members of the, and do not constitute. Let's see, in case UN involvement not considered appropriate. Let's see here. There's wants to be street. We gotta go financing. Here we go. So hang on here. I may actually be wrong. I may have to actually eat my foot on that one. You may be right. Because from what I understood, they actually paid out contracts. But according to Wikipedia, which is always the #1 arbiter of truth, the financial resources of UN peacekeeping operations are the collective responsibility of UN member states. Decisions about the establishment, maintenance, or expansions of peacekeeping operations are taken by the Security Council. According to UN Charter, every member state is obligated legally to pay their respective share for peacekeeping. Peacekeeping expenses are divided by the General Assembly based upon upon a formula established by member states, which takes into account the relative economic wealth of member states, among other factors. In 2017, the UN agreed to reduce the peacekeeping budget by $600 million after the U.S. initially proposed a larger decrease of approximately $900 million. But really quickly, this is giving us an interesting idea. So it looks as though... Okay, so it actually is true. I was about to eat my foot because it looked like I was wrong, but it actually is the case that countries around the world just pay into the UN a certain amount of money so that way they have a peacekeeping budget, and then the UN pays out that money in the form of contracts to other countries to go and conduct peacekeeping operations. So from what we understand, at least from what I'm reading here, no, those countries, like Ireland isn't going for the goodness of mankind, I'm just going to send my armed forces into Lebanon as UN peacekeepers and then pay for everything. They actually go, okay, the UN's giving me money, so we'll send these guys here to go peacekeep. So they do pay. Like I guess the best way to put it is that everyone puts in a tithe, and then they go, and then the UN pays out parts of those tithes to countries that then go and peacekeep. So that seems to be how it works. So with that, I hope we clarified that well. It looks like I was almost wrong there for a second, but it does look, and I might be getting this wrong, maybe reading this wrong, that the UN gets money from member states. Apparently, America makes up a large proportion of it at 28.57% of the total budget, and then that's paid out to countries that go and do the peacekeeping job. So the UN does pay people to go and do peacekeeping operations. They're not doing it for free. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Had to make sure to clarify that one. But moving on from that, you can see the ATACMS launch right there, which is pretty cool.
Man, that is pretty sick. Oh. A fireball.
Oh, look at that. Also, someone just said, Matt, the UN pays Ireland pays their troops. Yeah, but that's like saying Wagner PMC isn't a mercenary group. They're just a whole bunch of fun, silly guys hanging out together because it's actually the Russians paying Prigozhin and then Prigozhin pays them. Like, if the UN is paying an armed force to go peacekeep, they're being paid to do it. Like, it's not... that's kind of just trying to get into a rigmarole there of explaining it. Like that's like saying, actually, I'm actually not paying Amazon for this product. I'm actually paying Jeff Bezos because he runs the company, and then Jeff Bezos pays the Amazon employees. Like, no, you're buying a product from Amazon, so like the whole company Amazon's making profit off of your purchase. That's kind of how it works. But anyways, moving on from that, we are now moving into the Russian casualty report, and we've been able to see that the losses were good, except for this one.
Oh my
bobcat.
God. They only got one Bobcat. Oh my God. Let's see. Guardian Crypto said disappointing amount of special equipment compared to yesterday, but still lovely. Slava Ukraine. I like how that's almost written like a complaint to the manager almost. I agree. I'm complaining to the manager too. Why is there only one special equipment loss today? Come on, Ukraine. But the losses everywhere else are crazy. But Enforcer, tell us more.
Yeah, they were incredibly good with 1,300 soldiers lost in the past 24 hours, along with 49 APCs, 71 trucks, 9 main battle tanks, 29 artillery pieces, 45 drones, 1 MLRS, 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, and 1 Bobcat skid steer. Overall, they have done absolutely well today, and we were able to see that throughout a large part of the front line. Moving on to the Vovchansk, we got to see that today there was a little bit of an oopsie-daisy committed by one of the Russians. Whoopsie-daisy. Actually, I don't even know if we can show this clip, but there's a Russian down there, and he goes, "Hey, guys," and he doesn't know that these guys are Ukrainians. And oh, buddy, it was not good from there. But moving on from that, we're now going to be moving out of the Vovchansk area and a little bit further on down the lines into Marinka, where we got to see some Russian forces getting slammed by the 109th. Check it out. Music will start here soon. Oh, you knew it.
Oh yeah.
Have you ever wanted...
Pump the bass.
I gotta tell you, the music has never been done better. People have been going, wow, that's great music, wonderful music. We want more music.
They played this song, and they played it one time for the crowd. The crowd loved it. The crowd never heard such, you'll never hear such music anywhere else, I'm telling you.
You never heard such great symphonies being made by anyone ever. Just something like that. But we see
the only thing better than this beat is Rosie O'Donnell. The only thing worse than this beat.
Oh, man. Man, we see him hitting an MTLB now. Also, Kenneth, you are correct. The French Foreign Legion is a part of the French army. A lot of people think they're a mercenary group. No, they are an official part of the French army, 100%. So you are right on that, Kenneth. But you see multiple vehicles destroyed, burning and toasting even.
Also, by the way, I saw Duncan VR say in the live chat, how many North Korean losses are there in Ukraine? We sadly do not know that number right there. But like the poll says, Zelensky did confirm today that North Korean troops are indeed in Ukraine. And that was the first Ukrainian confirmation we've gotten of that. So I'm sure they will be trying to get a number of North Korean losses. But I'm sure it's going to be probably hard to differentiate between the Russian losses and the North Korean ones, because they really don't know who was who on the battlefield right now.
Well, we do have to remember the North Koreans aren't on the battlefield. They're inside of Russia firing off rockets from a pretty decent range. So they're probably not going to get killed anytime soon, to be entirely honest, to be included in any casualty report. Or if they are, then the Ukrainians...
Maybe.
Go ahead.
Well, maybe I misunderstood something, but the way I read it today, it sounded like Zelensky acknowledged that the North Koreans were not only in Ukraine supporting the Russians, but they're also possibly fighting on the front lines as well, from what I heard Zelensky saying earlier.
That might be the case of what he said, but from what we know from other information, it sounds as though they're only working on firing KN-23 missiles somewhere inside of Russia from a ballistic missile launcher. So I don't really know, unless we actually get footage of them existing out there, like living on the battlefield. I think they're largely in Russia or deep inside of occupied territory where they're not really going to be hit. And if they ever did get hit, the Ukrainians would probably never be able to prove whether they were North Korean or Russians, so they just get lopped into the casualty report as a Russian.
Oh, this got darted, man. He bailed.
Man, he hopped out and went running. Oh, and oh my goodness, he got a motorcycle with a sidecar blade. They had to show you all that for reference, but still, wonderful to see, and we love to see it. Moving on from that, we're now going to be moving a little bit further on down the lines where we got to see a Zoo Park counter battery radar being destroyed by the 45th Brigade today. Y'all want to see that, don't you? Of course you do. All right, we're going to be muting that, but there goes the Zoo Park. And I guess they aren't going to be at the Zoo Park anymore. They're going to be blown up. Toast into pieces. Reese's Pieces.
Man, call this a zoo park because they got turkeys out here.
Man, call this a zoo park because they be roasting pork out here. That's it. It smells like burnt pork.
Pulled pork.
Or a pulled orc. Take your pick.
Oh.
Pull apart. You want to check it out. But anyways, moving on from that, we also get to see the Ukrainians hitting a Russian mine roller here with an M67 fragmentation grenade. Went right in the hatch of the turret. Boosh. Blows up. Catches the inside on fire. Just like a nice, good Taco Bell meal. Wonderful to see, and good to know that they're still knocking out those Russian vehicles. We also get to see that near Uruzhane, they were also, once again, beginning to hit more Russians within this area. Check this out. Oh, whoa. That scared me. That would be heavily copyrighted if we played the whole thing right there. So we're not going to do that because we respect copyright.
It's those guitar riffings that really get you scared for the copyright because they're so recognizable and they're so loud.
I know, man. It's like Stairway to Heaven or something. You know what I mean? It's like I'm scared.
The Stairway to Copyright Hell.
Yes, indeed. Or maybe even Copyright Purgatory. One or the other. Aw, man, I know about copyright. Aw, man.
He may not know about copyright, but he knows about crack.
Aw, man, I know how to defame a person real well. It's just absolute slander. Aw, man. But moving on down into the Kherson area, we did get to see a Shahed drone also getting shot down in this area as well.
Oh, dang.
Yes! Yeah, baby!
Oh, yes.
Man, he actually emoted on him. he emoted on him. Listen to that. Man, look at this man.
Sound like a recording.
Man, it said, bro, he sat there and said, dude, this is so good. And then he just hit the soundboard and went, get out. out or something like that. It's like, what the hell? It's like, that's crazy. He just whipped that out in a single instant. But moving on from that and down into Theodosia, we also get to see some fire damage down here as well, which was really impressive, as it looks like a good amount of the facility ended up being destroyed in the blaze. A massive success. Great success. And so with that, we are now moving on from that little clip in Theodosia. And now we're going to be moving up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 963 of the war. And what's he doing in the at this white wall? I'm not going to lie, Matthew, with this wall behind him, it honestly looks like Enforcer Studio 2.0 on day one. I'm not going to lie.
Every time he sits on this wall right here, it looks like he's like an interrogation session or something like that. Like there's somebody's asking him behind the camera, how many fingers am I holding up? And they're holding up 4, and he says, "You're holding up 4 fingers." And they said, "No, we were holding up 5," and they just laugh at him. "Oh, no, I see 4. I see only 4.
Man, you know, with
long-lasting fingers."
Man, you know, with him looking at this camera this way, it looks like he's almost the interrogator, like the lights on you, and he's like, "Did you eat the macaroni and cheese?" or something like that. And it's like, "No, I didn't." "You're lying to me.
Did you get in the vehicle yesterday?
You're about to endure real torture, long-lasting torture." Something like that. That's honestly what he looks like, man. It's like, anyways, before we start laughing about the whole background and everything too much, without further ado, here's the speech. Speech!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Тепер вже готуємось до нових перемовин, що відбудуться цього тижня. Ми продовжуємо представляти нашим європейським партнерам нашу стратегію примусу Росії до миру. Команди нашої держави та команди лідерів, наших партнерів, яким вже представлений план перемоги, продовжують працювати над деталями. Потрібні спільні кроки, і це мають бути сильні кроки. Є певні додаткові питання, які маємо узгодити з нашими партнерами, але весь необхідний потенціал у партнерів є. І це абсолютно реалістично посилити позиції нашої держави, посилити позиції України саме так, як необхідно для чесного миру. І саме зараз потрібно діяти, щоб не дати Росії та її спільникам адаптуватись до наших можливостей. Ми бачимо, що нарощується союзництво між Росією і такими режимами, як у Північній Кореї. Це вже не просто про передачу зброї, це фактично про передачу людей з Північної Кореї до військових сил окупанта. Очевидно, що в таких умовах наші відносини з партнерами потребують розвитку. Фронт потребує більшої підтримки. Коли ми говоримо про більшу далекобійність для України та більш рішуче постачання для наших сил, це не просто перелік військових засобів. Це про збільшення тиску на агресора, який буде для Росії сильнішим, ніж вони можуть витримати. І це про недопущення більшої війни. Справжній мир може бути досягнутий лише завдяки силі, і весь наступний тиждень буде присвячений роботі з нашими партнерами заради такої сили, заради справжнього миру. Команди працюватимуть, буде робота із лідерами також. Дуже розраховуємо на те, що ухвалення рішень не забариться. Наші українські воїни, увесь наш народ довів, що Україна здатна досягти навіть того, що комусь здавалось неможливим. Ми вже неодноразово змінювали курс цієї війни. До кращого змінювали. Українці вміють битися, вміють вибивати майбутнє для своєї держави, для свого народу, для всіх нас. Це маємо зробити і зараз. Я пишаюся нашими людьми, і наші люди заслуговують на достатню допомогу і на справедливий мир. Я хочу подякувати зараз нашим бойовим бригадам Збройних сил України, які за цей тиждень найкраще проявили себе. Покровський напрямок, 38-ма окрема бригада морської піхоти, Курахівський напрямок, 79-та бригада ДШВ, Времівський напрямок, 425-й окремий штурмовий батальйон, Придніпровський напрямок, 35-та окрема бригада морпіхів, а також Оріхівський напрямок, 65-та і 118-та окремі механізовані бригади, 128-ма окрема гірсько-штурмова бригада. Дякую всім вам. І ще відзначу наших прикордонників, як і разом з іншими силами оборони і безпеки України гідно захищають нашу державу. Луганський прикордонний загін – це бригада «Помста», солдат Віталій Багінський, молодший сержант Олександр Балуєв, штаб-сержант Олександр Оліфіренко, капітан Віталій Кобаль, бригада «Гард». Хлопці воюють на Харківщині, солдати Андрій Демидов та Олександр Борисенко. Дякую вам та усім вашим побратимам. Харківський прикордонний загін, головний сержант Олександр Василець, старший сержант Владислав Кузніченко, Сумський прикордонний загін, старший сержант Микола Трохименко та майор Ігор Краплич. Дякую. А також відзначу усіх воїнів підрозділу «Дозор» Державної прикордонної служби України. Слава усім, хто з нами, хто з нашим народом, хто з Україною. Дякую кожному і кожній, хто допомагає. Слава Україні!
And Ram Slava.
And Hiram Slava.
And with that, that was the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And that actually rounds out our short war news, our short woo summary of the night, man. A short woo summary. Short woo. But still, with that, that rounds out our short war news summary for the night. Dang, that is hard to say tonight. But that is going to be moving us on into the next segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every one of you all. And boy, howdy, is it a fun segment. We always enjoy. But before we move on into that, I do have to give a massive thanks to you all once again for raising $4,710 for the revived soldiers of Ukraine. That is absolutely incredible, and we love to see it. It's just a wonderful thing. So with that, Matthew, do we have any other top donors to call out before we move on into the rest of everything else?
So yes, we do. Also, by the way, we're up to $4,710 raised of the $3,000 goal. So I must say that's tremendous right there. A huge shout out to everybody for that. And also, we have two more top donors to call off. Our first one here goes to Dad Good, who put in a $50 donation, and also Tom S, who put in a $50 as well. And huge shout out to Dad Good and Tom for that generosity for the fundraiser tonight. That's tremendous. And with that, we are fresh out of top donors. So Enforcer, what would you like to do? Would you like to take some questions, or would you like to address this poll?
I would like to address the poll. And the poll that I'd like to address, Matthew, is Mr. Lyubian Garshiman, who lives in the town of Zelona Gora. I'm just kidding. We actually have a poll that we put up to all of y'all. In I don't know his name, but still, Matthew, what do we got? Like, what do we got from that poll?
Oh. All right, so jumping into our polls, and you know how much we love the polls. The Polish are great, and we love the polls. And this poll right here says, Zelensky confirms North Korean troops are in Ukraine and warns of Ukraine being overwhelmed. And what are your thoughts? So 61% said that the West must intervene to help Ukraine right now, while 16% said, well, let's wait until Ukraine actually needs the help on the ground, and 12% said the West should not get involved. And on this one, I would say this. While I am completely for supporting Ukraine and them wanting the war 100%, we have to be very cautious before NATO gets involved on the ground inside of Ukraine, because that could lead to a World War III happening. There is a possibility of that being the case, because like many analysts have said, the one red line that actually might be a real red line with Russia is direct NATO involvement. And if we want to test that, we need to be very sure that Ukraine actually needs the help before we put that to the test. So I'm with the 16%. I say wait until Ukraine needs it and not until then. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say, I do believe that it is a bit of a dangerous thing to just throw the Western world into the Ukraine war immediately. And that pretty much creates World War III, best way to put it. And we've been trying to avoid World War III for a pretty good while, like an incredibly long while, for about 3 years now. So it would be pretty weird to just throw that all away because the North Koreans got involved with like 3,000 guys and really aren't changing the course of the war at all. Now, if the North Koreans got involved and they are changing the course of the war, then we'll have to circle back and consider getting involved. But right now, they're not. So there's really no reason or no emergency to start getting NATO involved immediately and trying to have them sway the course of the war. So that would largely be my take on it at the moment, because there's really no reason to rush into getting the entire Western world involved into a major war that would devolve into a world war at that point, without a doubt. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Now, real quick before we jump into our questions for the night, one very interesting thing, which I don't think you covered tonight, Enforcer, that was a big piece of news, was that Israel is actually getting some U.S. troops inside of their country to man the THAAD system, which the U.S. is sending to Israel very shortly. Now, that is actual U.S. direct involvement in that situation right there. And of course, there is an ongoing war between Iranian proxy forces and Israel. Now, on this one's a little bit different. I think the U.S. is a lot more apt to get involved directly on the ground inside of Israel instead of getting directly involved on the ground inside of Ukraine. They seem to be much more apt to get involved in Israel for some reason. I think that's probably because we're not so scared of Iran like we are scared of Russia. And when I say we're scared, I mean the U.S. government, not me. I would take a different approach. But right now we are seeing that, which is very interesting. So, Enforcer, what do you think about that? Troops on the ground in Israel and also the THAAD system as well. Does that mean the Iron Dome is not capable of keeping up with the incoming rockets?
It means that we're scared of what may be coming in. The Iron Dome can't keep up with incoming ballistic missiles. A lot of people think the Iron Dome can shoot down anything and everything. The Iron Dome can only shoot down small-scale rockets like the casaulties that are fired from Hamas and Hezbollah. The Iron Dome can't intercept anything really bigger than that. Like, for example, say like a KN-23, like a North Korean KN-23 that's being fired into Ukraine right now. An Iron Dome couldn't deal with that. Like, an Iron Dome's supposed to deal with small things like mortar rounds or little rockets, like homemade rockets, pretty much. Anything bigger than that, that largely falls in another system like David Sling or the Patriot or the Arrows. And the Ukrainians, well, the Israelis only have so many of those. And also, on top of that, we're starting to see that the Iranians are beginning to use, along with their proxies, a lot more advanced missiles that actually have an exo-atmospheric trajectory to them, which is pretty difficult to intercept for really anything. And the THAAD is one of the few systems that actually can conduct exo-atmospheric interception. So that's why we're deploying one, because the Iron Dome can't deal with everything. And that's something that a lot of people didn't know when the last attack happened, when Iran fired hundreds of ballistic missiles. Everyone went, oh, the Iron Dome failed. No, the Iron Dome didn't fail. It did what it was supposed to do, which is not shoot down giant missiles. It's only supposed to shoot down smaller stuff. And so what really failed was the amount of available interceptors that the Israelis had of a larger caliber, like the David Sling, which is kind of an intermediate-sized interceptor, the Patriots, which are a heavy caliber interceptor, and then the Arrows, which are also exo-atmospheric heavy caliber interceptors. So that's kind of why they failed, is because they didn't have a large number of available Patriots and Arrows and David Slings to be able to deal with it, but they do have a large number of Iron Domes, because it's kind of like, it's kind of like how, you can have loads and loads and loads of M4 carbines, and it's like, why didn't the M4 carbines blow up that tank? It's like, well, the M4 carbine isn't made to blow up a tank. It's made to shoot a guy, like an enemy soldier or something like that. So, you have to get the right kind of weapon for the right kind of situation. The Iron Dome certainly is not the right kind of weapon to be intercepting ballistic missiles from Iran.
Interesting. So I would just say, to me, honestly, I could see an argument where people that, for example, want troops on the ground inside of Ukraine, they might be a little upset after seeing the U.S. sending troops to Israel. Because when I heard that today, I was like, okay, they're sending them as a support role for, to example, take care of the THAAD system and also help operate it. They're not sending like ground troops into Israel, but they are nonetheless sending troops in. And we were not really willing to do that inside of Ukraine. So while I do understand the need to send the THAAD, because, for example, they can't shoot everything down with the Iron Dome that they need to shoot down, I could see where some people might get angry at that. So it's just an interesting comparison there.
Yeah, but at the same time, there is a really different kind of an environment in the Middle East than there is with Russia in Ukraine, because Russia is a major nuclear armed country. It's not major in any other degree rather than that one. So getting directly involved in the war in Ukraine on the ground in that way could be massively escalatory and can end up producing results that aren't satisfactory, like a nuclear Armageddon. However, with dealing with Iran, because we still understand they really don't have a nuclear weapon, the situation's entirely different. We can do whatever we want, and it's not like anyone's going to start getting nuked if it, went off the rails or anything like that. So that's why we can be a lot more flexible with what we do in support of Israel than we can do in Ukraine, because the large fear is, what if they start flinging nukes like with the Russians? That's really the fear with them. We don't have to worry about that with the Iranians, because from what we know, they don't have a working nuke yet, and they may actually still be a good ways away from developing one.
Maybe so, maybe so. Me personally, I'm not going to get upset about it, but there are some people out there that I saw earlier today saying, "Oh my God, we need to send troops to Ukraine because if we're sending them to Israel, we should send them to Ukraine." I personally don't agree with it. I think there is a massive difference, like you're saying. Like Putin, we have to keep in mind that Putin does have the nuclear weapons, and while some people want to dismiss that, and in most cases he is like drawing these fake red lines to test the resolve of NATO and saying, "Oh look, if you cross this red line of sending F-16s, then we're going to launch a nuke at Ukraine." He didn't do that, and that was a fake red line. But there is, I would assume, a real red line somewhere. A lot of analysts, like I've said, have said the red line is going to be direct NATO involvement inside of Ukraine, but we really just do not know. So we have to be careful before we test that. And that's what I was saying earlier in the poll as well. We don't want to test that unnecessarily without a proper cause. We need to make sure that it's the last resort necessary by sending in NATO troops before we do that in Ukraine. So I actually agree with you on the difference.
I would agree with myself as well. Thank you. But still, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, let's get us on into some questions, man. Because I understand we got some really interesting questions that have been cooking tonight.
Yes, indeed. So, jumping into our Morse code tonight, before we get into our questions, the Morse code decoders tonight were Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Banu, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Her Royal Fluffiness, and Arabelle Garbo. And they said the code for today says China is trying to start their own thing across the sea. Tofu Dreg War. LSA, QRM.
And ding, that is the sound of money, and y'all got the dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. A tofu dreg war. That's what we're going to call it if China and Taiwan go to war. We're going to call it the War of the Tofu Dreg. And I got to thank y'all all for getting that correct. Y'all got that dead on the nail, and I thought it was funny. I thought it was funny at least, and I thank y'all for getting that right. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Neil Vizanant, who says, would it technically be a war crime if you unleashed a swarm of mosquitoes on the enemy, but you made sure that they weren't carrying any diseases so no one got sick? Also, I got a good meme for this. I'll be finding it while you answer this one.
Technically, no, because as long as it's not carrying any kind of a biological component in it, and it's just mosquitoes, there isn't anything technically wrong with that, actually. It would really throw off, like, the biological ecosystem in that area, probably, just having a massive load of mosquitoes around. But beyond that, there wouldn't be any war crime involved in that at all, unless if you, like, had the mosquitoes carry some sort of a deadly pathogen or something like that, and then that would be biological warfare, and that would be a war crime. But it's just a normal mosquito. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, you could unleash thousands of frogs on the Russians. There's nothing criminal about that. But Matthew, do you have a meme? Do you have a delicious meme?
Yes, I do have a meme. I'm trying to scroll down while Twitter's lagging out on me real quick to go find the meme. Oh my God! Like, give me just a second. Like, stall for just a second while I try to find it. It's a good one. Like,
What
I think people
are
get
the
laugh out of it.
charges? Enjoying a meme? A succulent Chinese meme? How dare you, sir? Get your hands off my weenus! This is the bloke who touched me on the weenus, people. Oh, and you, sir, are you ready to receive my limp weenus? How dare you, sir? Get your hands off me! And ta-ta and farewell. Have you found it yet, Matthew? Like, the dang, man. I've run out
I'm
of...
looking for it desperately.
I've run out
I'm
of...
looking for it. Hold on a second. I think, let's see. I think I'm getting close to it. I think I'm like a couple away from it. Oh my God. Hold on a second. Now I'm building this up so much. Now I'm like stalling for so long. This better like make everybody happy. So I'm going to go find it. Okay. I'm scrolling right up on it. I'm like 10 posts away.
I'll filibuster a little bit more, Matthew. Aw, man, it's time for another hit piece. Aw, man, I literally cannot work. I cannot compel myself to work unless if it's hating on the enforcers.
Oh, I found it. I found it.
Oh, here we go. Is it on Twitter?
It's under the like tab on the Twitter page. It's under the likes tab. Go take a look. Now, I'm not gonna lie. Like, this is not gonna match everybody's expectation for waiting that long, but at least you can see it.
What the hell is this? Dude, this is actually me. My expectations.
See.
What in the hell?
Now, see, I don't know what the hell this was, and I even said that in the post. So, what the hell is this? I didn't know what this was. But speaking of mosquitoes on the enemy, this is literally a prototype of that. They could unleash this fella with 4 arms, actually, kind of odd and interesting. But he has wings like the Ukrainian Air Force on it. This is tremendous.
Dude, you know what that expression on this thing's face? This really is hot dog man. Aw, man, I'm defeated in life. Aw, man.
Oh my God, I have to resort to being a bioweapon after the YouTube career failed.
But unlike Hot Dog Man, the Ukrainian emblems are actually ironed on instead of his little outfit that he would have, where he'd literally just rip those off and then put on a Palestinian flag and then rip it off and put on some political banner and then rip that off and then flip on a Weather Channel banner and then flip that off and then put a Hate the Enforcer banner on. Like, he would have like interchangeable like insignia on this thing. It would change literally by the day depending on what he thinks would get him the most money or the most views. But beyond that, this thing is absolutely horrendous. Like, I'm not gonna lie, man. They need to put this thing away
Also,
for a long time.
They were thinking really hard about trying to like keep the thing clean too, because they have them stand on like a little sheet of cardboard down there, like make sure their feet don't get dirty. It's like they were really like concerned with keeping this thing in top-notch condition when they got it back.
Bro, this thing is an SCP from the SCP Foundation. They got it on a cardboard. They're like, it's a Keter class SCP. This thing could kill you in a second. Don't get it off the cardboard.
I think this thing might have got nabbed by the SBU like later on in the day. It looks like it's standing in Kyiv or something like that from the looks of it. I would assume that he probably got nabbed.
Man. Man, this thing is ridiculous stuff. And someone said, what is with the head on it? I don't know. I have no idea. The eyeballs are swollen, like some kind of a meme of like someone with swollen eyes. You know, like one of those fish you see at Walmart with the huge, giant, bulbous eyes. Like, that's the eyes on this thing. Does it have a mouth? Like, it looks like it has a little mouth down there.
Man, I don't think mosquitoes have mouths, do they?
I don't think they do. Like, I don't even think this thing is anatomically. This thing is not anatomically correct, obviously.
I think there's a man under there.
I think there is, actually. I would scroll down on the Twitter comments over here to see if there's more pictures. I'm scared to do that, though. Who knows what's in the comment section.
Like, wait, somebody said hot dog boy over there. Ted Lewis said hot dog boy. Man, everybody already knows who it is, man. This is his new job. He's the sad mascot.
The dejected look and everything. Aw, man. Oh, dude, by the way, man. Speaking of which, man, we finally got that fresh hit piece, man. And you know what's funny, man? I actually like took a quick glance at it today. What is so funny about it, man, is that the guy is so brain dead and can't come up with his own original stuff. He's using the stupid talking points that you hear in politics, like someone's so creep, I'm so brat, you know, that kind of stupid shit. I'm like, oh my god. I'm like, dude, you can't even come up with your own stuff. Like he heard that, you know what I'm talking about, man. Like, right, like with the whole, you know, that's so creep, I'm so brat. Like, I'm like, oh my god, dude. I'm like, can you just be original enough not to steal stuff from everyone? Like, can you actually come up with your own stuff? Like that, like honestly,
yeah. Whenever he starts resorting to constant hit pieces, it's like literally the death throes of a dying channel run by an idiot. And that's literally what this is.
And over the course of like 9 hours, get like 3,000 views, which is like less than 5% of his viewership. It's like, that's it, dude. Pack it up. It's over. It's like the hit pieces aren't even bringing him in anymore. It's done. Because back in the day, if y'all didn't know, like he used to get like 10,000 views per stream or video or whatever, and he would. But, you know, he would make a hit piece about us and it would do like twice as good. So it would get like 20,000 views. And this was like his model for like getting any subs at all because he sucks at running a channel. So he would make a hit piece and he'd get like maybe 50 subs and we'd lose like maybe 10 or 20 or something like that from it. But now his videos are like getting 1,000 to 2,000 views a piece, which is like less than like a measurable percentage of his subscribership. And then he makes a hit piece on us now, and he's ran that into the ground so much, just constantly making hit pieces, not just on us, but like everyone now, that he only got 3,000 views on it. I get a laugh out of that so much. And then also, Matthew, what's so funny is that the entire thing is, I'm going to expose them. Look at these clips we made of streams you can publicly access on their channel. Look at this. I'm exposing. It's like if you had like a hot mic recording of us like off air saying something, like maybe that would be exposing, maybe, but it's like there's no secret we don't like the guy, so it's like there's nothing really to expose. Like, I don't really get like the mental logic behind that. Like, he's like, listen to this clip on their stream. It's like, bro, we said it. It's like, we said it live. Man,
you know, it's gotta suck to be like it's gotta be suck to be a viewer on his channel, because they're all like clamoring for news right now. Like the few people he has left are like, oh god, can we please get like a news story, please? Because he hadn't published like any good news in like ages, because he's been focused on stupid junk like left and right, getting literally like 500 to 1,000 views a video, which is abysmal. Like even when I had my YouTube channel about motorcycles, I never never only got 500 views of video. Like, even on the first video I uploaded, it was never that low. I don't even know how that's possible, really. But, man, he's sitting over there just squandering so badly, posting hit pieces after his audience is like, oh, damn, not another hit piece. We wanted some news. Man, they're getting nothing from that guy. I can't believe, like, anybody watches that channel anymore. It's dwindled down to literally nobody. Like, I would imagine that probably, like, 95% of his subs are inactive because there's only, like, what is it, like 0.5% engagement on his channel? It's like less than 1%.
And also, someone said, apparently this was in the video, they said threatening to show up to any in real life, let's see, association with LSA nonprofit you've been talking about. Yeah, that's that kind of stuff right there, though, that a clown like him doesn't know. You can just call the police if he does that multiple times, especially if he ends up being harassing or threatening to anyone, and you just have him arrested for stalking or harassing. I mean, hell, we've already opened up a lawsuit against him that's just been sitting around. Maybe we'll serve him here in a minute, just to remind him that it's not all fun and dandy to just run your mouth. Because that's something, by the way, that I don't know if y'all know. There's an open lawsuit against the guy right now for defamation against us. So it's like, we could just have the process server go and finally serve him, because it's not like the place he's in is a mystery, anymore. It's like, we know where to serve him. So it's like, he can't hide from the court, if there was a lawsuit to begin on that, which it technically already has. It's like, it is what it is. I mean, if he wants to continue, maybe we'll finally kick it up and play ball, and he can end up figuring out how to work with that, because it's not going to be fun for him. But he wants to keep on going. People have got to learn lessons hard ways sometimes. Old habits die hard, I suppose. But anyways, going off of that note, also someone said, yeah, you made a new video about you like 9 hours ago. That's the crazy thing. He can't get off his ass to actually support Ukraine or anything anymore. He only does it like once a week, but he can sure as hell pump out 2 hit pieces on us in the course of like 3 days. So he can't do anything for Ukraine, but he sure as hell can hate on us at any given moment. Really shows you where his loyalties lie with that. And that's why we make fun of him endlessly. And that's his thing. He's like, they're always making fun of me. It's like, yes, like we are. Like, if you'd stop being an idiot, maybe we'd stop making fun of you. I don't know. That's usually how it works. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, and this one is going to go to Kenneth Prochak, who says, in your opinion, why do you think it's taken so long for the take-up of drones to attack Israel?
Do you understand what that means, actually?
Let's see here. I think maybe he's asking, why is it taking Israel so long to launch a response back to Iran? I think that's his question.
Probably because they're having to deal with a lot of diplomatic, kind of like red tape in the background. They're really having to try and get approval from America, or America's badgering them not to do certain things, and they're trying to figure out if they're going to do it or if they're not. They're also probably trying to figure out how to coordinate all of their combined arms efforts to make sure it's successful. There's probably a couple of reasons there, but really most likely because of diplomatic red tape from foreign countries like America and France, or the United Kingdom even. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to M. McKernan, who said, if Ukraine had all the ships, tanks, and planes it originally had built, Russia would have already lost the war, and do you agree?
And can you reread that one more time? I want to make sure I heard that correctly.
They said, if Ukraine had all the ships, tanks, and planes it had originally built, Russia would have already lost the war. And thoughts?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If you're talking about from Soviet times, I was trying to figure out what that meant. If you're talking about everything they built during Soviet times, oh, yeah, they would have won, because they produced most of the stuff that the Soviet Union used, at least all of the advanced technological stuff. If we're talking about what they produced after the end of the Soviet Union, well, that's kind of what they have right now. So if you're talking about during the Soviet times, certainly. If you're talking about afterwards, it's probably be the same thing we're seeing now. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Andrew Honeycutt, who says, the battlefield of the future is in space and cyberspace, and I'd like to hear both of your thoughts on the subject, and I didn't super chat last stream so I could donate an LSA, And also, Andrew, I would say this. I do agree with you on the cyberspace part of things. Now, on the space part of things, I personally think that is a little ways off. The cyberspace thing is happening right now. Like a lot of the softening operations that happen right before an attack is launched include cyber operations. It's just something that has become so prevalent because everything is controlled by technology and computer now. So you can pretty much soften up a force, like, for example, knocking their power grid offline, knocking their water systems offline. You can do multiple things like that to soften up a force, so that way you can attack a lot easier. That's the main concern. If, for example, if the U.S. went to war with China, we're concerned that they could knock our entire power grid offline and also various other infrastructure and soften us up tremendously before they were to launch an attack on our country, which would be detrimental if they were able to pull that off. So I do agree on the cyberspace part, but the space part will be coming a little bit later. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that in my opinion, cyberspace and space is incredibly important. The Space Force actually has a pretty important mission at this point, which is called orbital warfare. At any given moment, there are thousands of satellites, well, actually, there's tens of thousands of satellites that are orbiting the Earth at this very moment. And a lot of those are controlled, well, not a lot of them, but a good amount of them are controlled by foreign countries. And there's a lot of those that are our own. The Space Force's mission is to protect our satellites from foreign interference, while at the same time, in the advent of war, attacking and intercepting or completely destroying enemy satellite networks and systems to be able to give us the upper hand in space. Because it's not necessarily about space warfare like you would imagine in Star Trek, where there's people in space fighting each other. It's really about the abilities that people have put in space to help them out down here on the ground on Earth. And the Space Force's mission is actually a very important one, and kind of is a more realistic continuation of the Star Wars idea or concept that was brought about back in the 80s that never came into being because it was far too expensive to implement. But beyond that, I would say that space warfare, at least in its very infantile form of just orbital warfare, like we're seeing the Space Forces doctrine begin to really coalesce into a thing, is a very important deal, along with cyberspace. Cyberspace is far more important at this moment, in my opinion, I have to agree with Matthew, than orbital warfare or warfare involving space at the moment. Cyber warfare is wildly important. The world works on the internet. It's literally like internet and cyberspace is as important to us now as industrial technology was to the people of World War I and World War II. It is wildly important. It is a strategic imperative to protect it, and also it's a strategic imperative to try and destroy it for others if we were to ever go to war with them. So I would say that is a very important focus, and once again, that is another job of the Space Force. The Space Force deals with cyberspace and also real space above the surface of the planet. So I would say that as far as our combat abilities go in the future and also fighting ability, the Space Force is a very crucial component of what we're looking at in the future. You can't physically really see what the Space Force does, but I can guarantee y'all that it is one of the most important branches to be seen, and it's going to become even more important as the decades pass, just like the U.S. Air Force. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we've actually reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank each and every single one of y'all so much once again for supporting this fundraiser and helping this fundraiser to get to where it is. It is at an incredible $4,710, and I got to tell y'all that that is absolutely incredible right there. And I got to thank every single one of y'all who supported that fundraiser tonight and helped us to send all of that support to Revive Soldiers of Ukraine, so that way they can help out to save another Ukrainian soldier's life and help them to live another day. I thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 48 hours of the news from around the world. And also, Matthew will probably be joining y'all tomorrow with another Short War Summary. Also, a big thanks to everyone, by the way, for watching the Short War Summary put out today. We didn't actually expect this one to do well because it was kind of on a bit of a more niche topic. Crazily enough, though, it's gotten up to 172,000 views, which is way better than I thought it was ever going to do. And I thank everyone for really watching that and enjoying that, even with that being not really on our normal bread and butter news, which is on Ukraine and Israel, but all the way over in East Asia on the Korean Peninsula, crazily enough. But with that, thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all on the next stream. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Leaf Spring Army. The Leaf Spring Army will never die.
And come on, Jack. Listen, folks. Thank you all for another great stream once again tonight. It was an excellent fundraiser stream, raising over $4,700 to help out Ukraine once again. And huge thanks to you all in the LSA for helping to make that possible once again. And like the Enforcer said, I will be joining you all tomorrow midday for a short war summary, if there is enough news to cover, of course. And also, we'll be back on Tuesday night at our usual time for the next night of war news streaming to cover the last 72 hours or 48 hours or something like that of news. But with that, thank you all once again for another great stream. Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava, get some rest, and good night.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
On